Salutations and welcome to Pod Mortem. I'm Reneé Hunter Vasquez, joined as always by my co-host, my husband, and my brother.
Hi, I'm John Paul Vasquez.
Hi, I'm Travis Hunter.
This week we're recording live from Teeny Town discussing the 2019 supernatural horror film, Dr. Sleep. Mike Flanagan both directed the film and wrote the screenplay, adapted from the Stephen King novel of the same name. This film stars Ewan McGregor as an adult Danny Torrance, Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat, and Kylie Curran as Abra Stone. The film not only serves as an adaptation to the novel Dr. Sleep, but doubles as a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's 1980 horror classic, The Shining. So what did you guys think of Dr. Sleep the first time you saw it?
Honestly, I really liked it, and Mike Flanagan had such a difficult task ahead of him.
Man.
Because, first of all, Stephen King has gone on record for decades saying how unsatisfied he was with Kubrick's The Shining. So, first, he had to convince Stephen King that the public would enjoy a sequel to that film while also remaining faithful to the novel as to not piss off Stephen King and his legion of fans. So, you know, it was a very difficult task. I think he did a great job with it. I do remember seeing the trailer for this movie, and I was so excited for it, and then I didn't go to see it.
See, and that's the thing. I love The Shining. I read The Shining and Dr. Sleep, and when it came out, and it was done by Mike Flanagan.
Exactly.
I was super fucking excited, and then I never made it to the movies. We ended up watching it for the first time not too long ago. Here, we had rented it.
Why didn't we ever go?
I don't know. And it's kind of a problem because of the massive like box office success of it. And there was another film. It might have been Chapter 1 and 2, potentially. I'm not sure. But even though Dr. Sleep made all of its money back and then some, they considered it like a box office failure as compared to those two. And it's like, all I can say for that is lesson learned. If you see a movie coming out in theaters that you're excited about, you just have to go see it.
Go support it.
You have to support it because, you know, that's how everybody makes decisions. Oh, we'll make more of these because, or
which sucks,
this director
because
will get another opportunity because, you know.
This is arguably a better film than It or It Chapter 2 to me.
Hands down. Not even any question.
I really liked the movie, and I don't know anything about the books because I don't read as much as you do.
Yeah, I didn't read them either.
But just by watching them, and I liked it. I do have questions, but I mean, of course, we'll get into that a little later. Mm-hmm. But as a whole, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, and I want to fangirl out about Mike Flanagan just for a moment before we move on.
No, please do.
I would watch Mike Flanagan direct Traffic. He has done a few Stephen King adaptations at this point, and the little breadcrumbs that he drops in dialogue or in, like, this dude he's a constant reader. He is a Stephen King fan. He respects the source material, and I mean, any changes that are made fucking improve upon the source material.
Right, and that's, dude, when you think about that and you get the praise of Stephen King for having done it.
Yeah.
You know, we can argue all day over the Shining adaptation from Stanley Kubrick. He changed a lot of things that a lot of people weren't happy with. Ended up with a classic, maybe one of the most classic horror films of all time. As I was talking to Dad today, he's like, but as an adaptation, it's not good.
Of course. I said the same thing. It's not, but it's a fantastic movie.
But when you look at Mike Flanagan, you're like, yeah, sure, he changed a lot in this movie to fit the sequel and the book at the same time. But every change he made, I would imagine. I mean, I really enjoyed the movie. There wasn't a point in time that I was like, oh, well, that's an odd choice. Yeah. So, you know, as a person who didn't read the book, there was nothing that stood out as bad.
And he's just...
I can agree with that because I didn't... Like I said, I didn't read any of the books either. But it's just as a movie, it's great. I liked it. Yeah,
absolutely. He is just masterful. The Haunting of Hill House.
Well, I'm glad that you pay attention to who directs or does what, because I don't give a shit whose name is what, honestly.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but I really don't. Like, I mean, if it looks good, I want to go see it. It doesn't matter whose name is on it. But she's always like, when you guys talk about this Flanagan guy, it's always, oh, well, everything he does is great. Well, I guess obviously I like it because all the movies that we're watching, I'm enjoying as well.
I mean, what?
But that's what I'm saying. I'm glad that you keep up with it because my head doesn't keep that kind of information.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Haunting of Hill House is arguably the best thing on Netflix.
That they've
No,
ever
And
put
yeah.
out.
if you haven't seen it and you just want to see this man's work, I would recommend going to watch that.
Hush,
And Hush,
Oculus.
Oculus, Gerald's Game.
I mean,
See, I like all of those except for
Yeah.
Hush, but
I appreciate again that he works with a small group of actors.
I love
like
that so
he
much.
recycles them through his project. I can't say enough good things about Mike Flanagan. I just wanted to get that out of the way because
rather than gush about him for
yeah,
an hour
man,
and a half.
everything that he's involved in, I am in 100%. But he especially has my heart in the way he handles Stephen King adaptations.
He cares and
Yeah.
he knows that other people care.
Yes.
When you're adapting material, you couldn't ask for anything more.
For sure. Now, before we drink the steam out of this film, we would like to issue a warning for spoilers. Pod Mortem is a very in-depth podcast, and in thoroughly discussing horror films, we have no choice but to spoil a thing or two. If you don't wish to be spoiled, please go watch the film, then come back and enjoy the show. If you've already seen the film or don't care about spoilers, then let's dare to go back. Now, obviously, this film relies heavily on already having seen The Shining. If you haven't, I would advise you go watch it or even listen to our previous episode as a refresher. So as the film opens, we immediately hear music from The Shining,
Yeah.
and then we see the vintage Warner Brothers logo.
It looks exactly like the opening.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like this really kind of sets the stage for the parallels that are coming between Dr. Sleep and The Shining. And then we get an aerial shot, coming onto, I
Right.
guess, a campground.
Also, again, the aerial shots are not that Kubrick owns aerial shots, but it's another homage to The Shining in a
yes.
way.
Yeah.
We're in Florida in 1980, which is also when shit went down at the Overlook in
Exactly.
The Shining. Take a shot every time we say The Shining.
It's gonna-
No,
Right.
yeah, don't.
You'll be dead.
You'll
You
die.
will-
Yeah, you will die. So a little girl named Violet, who I recognized immediately as Nell, as young
Yeah,
Nell
yeah,
from Hill
yeah.
House. She's played by Violet McGraw. She is going to pick flowers.
So Violet is Violet.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And I guess it's 1980 because she's just like, Mom, I'm going to pick some flowers. And
Yeah.
Mom's like,
Yeah,
like, it's
2020
fine.
it'd be the helicopter parenting.
Yes. So she, I guess, goes to like the stream to pick flowers, and we meet Rose the Hat.
Yes, we do. Just very quickly.
I know you have some comments.
Rose the Hat, let's just say Rebecca Ferguson, all right?
Yes.
She created a very captivating performance for this character.
Absolutely.
Honestly, very easily one of the best parts of the film.
For sure.
And I was impressed because to me, whenever you look at The Shining, there's not really a villain per se. Things happen and, but to have a villain in this universe is an interesting.
Dynamic, yeah.
And for her to hold up with the history of this film and do well,
Yeah.
it's incredible. And I just wanted to shout out her performance because I was very captivated by it.
Was that all you wanted to shout out?
Doesn't matter.
No, I think she did a good job.
Excellent
too.
job, yeah.
But I do want to say, and I know it's just, I feel like a young Michelle Pfeiffer would have done a better job.
I wouldn't say better, but I could definitely see her in the role.
But I love Michelle Pfeiffer.
Well, who
so-
doesn't love Michelle Pfeiffer?
That's
Well,
fair.
then there's my point.
I think she brought what was needed to the role.
Absolutely.
No, she did.
She
No,
was very
yeah.
alluring.
Yeah. And scary.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she brought with her a wisdom. I don't know. I thought it was good.
No,
No,
she did a
she
damn
did
good
an excellent job,
Oh,
yeah.
She did a real good job.
This is the first time we see her. She kind of seems harmless. She's talking to Violet and she's trying to show her magic. And as she's talking to Violet, a man appears in the woods and is looking at them. She is talking about her hat and how she wears it so much that her friends call her Rose the Hat and her hat's magic. And she
Right.
has Violet reach in and pull out a violet. And then there are more people in the woods
Yeah.
looking at them. And
It makes me laugh because Violet's obviously getting concerned at this point.
Yeah.
And Rose the Hat's like, no, you're missing the trick.
yes,
Yeah.
please focus.
Eyes on me. All eyes on me. Don't
So-
look at the creepy
Yeah,
assembly of.
she looked like she didn't give a shit, and then when they appeared, she's like, "Wait a minute."
Yeah.
Well,
what's-
yeah.
And the way that it's shot, they're perfectly centered between the trees. It's very eerie.
very creepy.
Very
yeah.
eerie.
So Rose kind of distracts Violet by eating the flower. And Violet says, no, don't eat it. It's special. And Rose says the special ones have the best taste, which is heavy foreshadowing. Done in a very clever
very
way, I
smart
think.
way.
Yeah.
The thing about that to me is that whenever she says that, her eyes kind of start glowing.
Yes.
Rose
Yeah.
the Hat. And I'm like, again, Stephen King universe. I'm like, are these deadlights?
What the fuck is happening?
She's playing Pennywise basically in this
Yeah.
scene.
You want
like
a
with
balloon?
what happened with Georgie,
Yeah.
but just in a different way.
Yeah. So at this point, the people in the woods start advancing. And Rose holds her arm so that she can't get away, and then it fades to black.
Why do they all look like they just got out of an AA meeting? Like
They look a little rough.
yeah, it's kind of like you
it's-
would think if they're like a little cult or a little group, they'd at least dress better, or they would have kind of matching uniforms or something. I don't know. I'm just saying, you guys are, you're targeting people or children or whatever, and whatever you're doing.
Maybe it was a rough time, and that's why they.
And
I mean, we'll talk about it more.
Right.
Yeah. It's a bohemian lifestyle, it seems.
Yeah.
But continue.
So normally I wouldn't even talk about the title card of a film, but this one we get a shot of the snowy overlook, and then on top of the shot slowly builds the iconic carpet of the overlook,
Right.
and then we get the title Dr. Sleep. And I mean, it's just
great.
Yeah, it's real good.
just even that you're like, hell yeah, like I'm in.
Yeah.
So we're back at the Overlook in 1980. And Danny is riding his big wheel. And at this point, from the back that we're seeing, it is indistinguishable from The Shining.
Absolutely. Framing, camera movement, lighting, everything looks the
It's
same.
exactly the same.
Sets. I read that the sets were actually built from the Kubrick, I guess, the estate gave the original blueprints to Mike Flanagan and the production so they could recreate
That's
the
cool.
sets
Yeah, that's
pretty
really
cool.
cool.
perfectly.
Well, I saw
and they
that
did.
they had recreated it, and he was like, "No,
That's really cool.
it looks too aged and too old," and so they
Right.
did it again.
Interesting.
Like, he was like, "We're getting this right," basically.
There were only, I believe, 3 shots that were reused from
Yes.
Kubrick's The Shining. Just to say off the top,
No, yeah.
the recreation is so meticulous and incredible.
It's like
Just
enough
incredible.
to make you like gasp. Like,
Yeah.
is this
I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really glad they did that too.
Yes,
That they
yeah.
didn't like try to change it in a way to
No.
make
No.
it like fit with the, I guess, now or whatever. Like it's looked exactly the
like
same.
it.
Even worse, Mike Flanagan, from what I read, had to convince Stephen King that Kubrick's Overlook Hotel was more iconic than Stephen King's miniseries, The Shining Hotel.
Oh, Steven.
And as much as I respect Stephen King, the pop culture war happened and he
Yeah.
lost. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. And so I'm so glad that he allowed them to go with Kubrick's Overlook Hotel.
Absolutely. But he's rounding the corners just like he did in The Shining, and he stops outside room 237, and the door opens, and you can barely see something moving in the shadows, and then that naked old woman comes up to the door, and then Danny is waking up. I guess this is a nightmare he's remembering in his dream, and he goes to the bathroom and hears water splashing, and he opens the door. Someone's at the tub. The hand grabs at the curtain, very akin to when the young naked woman pulls the
Right.
curtain aside for Jack Torrance in
The Shining.
The Shining.
The Shining, yeah.
Take a shot. So Danny closes the door and stands in the hallway. The knob of the bathroom starts turning, and Danny wets himself.
That's a lot of piss.
It was well. That's
That was
why he was
a
going to the
lot.
bathroom.
Well, he's like, I already had to go, and then I got
And then I got
to deal
scare
with.
pee on top
yeah,
of it.
fantastic.
Scared pee.
You know, everybody knows scare pee is
Right, it's
more volume.
It's more pee.
So Wendy comes up behind him and holds him.
His mother.
His mom. And Wendy is played by Alex Esso, and to me, she sounded just
Dude.
like Shelley Duvall.
There are moments where it's indistinguishable.
It's insane. But she changes Danny his pants. I mean, he's not wearing a diaper,
Yeah,
obviously,
no.
but she gets him changed, and he is sucking his thumb. And like the same form of regression that we saw in The Shining
When
he encountered
went into room
the woman
237.
in room 237. So Wendy mentions that Danny has not spoken since they left the Overlook.
Right.
So later, Danny's outside sitting on a bench, and he is joined by Dick Halloran. So for a quick recap, in The Shining, Dick was the cook at the Overlook who was the first one to really explain and even name The Shining for Danny for what he was experiencing. And Dick is played by Carl Lumbly in Dr. Sleep, and fantastic casting.
No, yeah.
No, it's great.
Like
It's kind of a strange balance because the new actors suggest the characters from Kubrick's film enough to take you back, but they're not distracting to say, oh, they're just doing an impression of...
for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's perfect. He weaved it. Like, it's just incredible. It's so good.
Definitely. So Halloran reminds Danny of when they first met and how he really helped him understand The Shining, basically. And he says that Danny will one day do that for someone else, which almost seems like a throwaway line, but it's not.
No.
Danny finally speaks and he's like, no, I won't. He says that The Shining is too dangerous. He doesn't want it. Like, he's not going to use it. And he kind of gets pissed off because Halloran had told him that the things in The Shining were just pictures in a book. Mm-hmm. And he's like, newsflash, they're not.
He's like, a picture in a book never kicked my ass, Dick.
So Dick's like, well, to me, they were. And we kind of see how strong Danny's shine is, that he was so affected by them. And to Halloran, they really were just pictures in a book.
Right.
Danny was physically harmed by them. And he says, and again, this is really setting up the premise of the movie, that they want to eat his shine, basically. That he shines so bright that it attracted them to him. Mm-hmm. Then he tells a story about his grandfather who died and kept coming back, and gives Danny a box to memorize.
Well, he said something that made me laugh because he was talking about his grandfather and he was like, when he died, I danced. And I'm like, you danced? Like, did you Cabbage Patch? Was it flossing? Did Dick Halloran invent flossing?
He was happy as hell. But he gives him a box to memorize and says to turn basically his shine against them.
So to me, this kind of opens up a little bit of a situation for me that doesn't really reconcile with the original version of The Shining. Whenever they were talking about room 237 in The Shining, he tells Danny to stay the hell away from there, right?
Yeah.
Danny, of course, doesn't oblige, and it basically is the whole movie, right? But if he's got this box that he's got in his back pocket, why would he be afraid of room 237? Why wouldn't he just cleared it out himself?
Well, he's not as strong as Danny.
But
so
then,
maybe your box corresponds to your shine.
But he's got the box that he's used.
Yeah, but maybe he's not mentally strong enough to take on the woman in the bathtub because clearly she's a badass.
I guess.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
But
or even like later on when the Shining stuff started to get real, he could have been like, Danny, I got this whole box thing. Just fucking chill.
Listen.
We can figure it out, dude. We don't even need it. We won't even have a second movie. What?
Well, yeah, damn.
But I guess it's good that didn't happen, so we could have this movie.
Right.
But continue.
But like you said, he tells him to memorize the box so that he can keep it in his mind. And then basically he says, well, you got to get back to your mom. And Wendy comes up. She had lost him, which I would never let that boy out of my sight again, ever, after what happened at the Overlook. But, and then Dick is just gone. So you kind of see that, you know, Danny's doing his thing and he's talking. He's
getting back into The Shining.
Yeah, Dick is dead.
Yeah.
I do want to say that I was kind of confused, honestly, at first.
Really?
And I was like, so this dude's just alive again or what?
Well, he lived in the book, so you
that's what I'm saying, because I remember you telling me that, so I was like, so are they redoing this?
Honestly, they treaded that line in this because he could just be communicating with Danny. He could be alive. He could be dead.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the only, I was just like, what? I was like, so what?
Depending on which you prefer.
Yeah.
Which version.
Well, I feel like it's a little more concrete later, but
That's true. At this point, it's hard. The score of this entire movie is very interesting because it borrows a lot from the original.
Yes, it does.
The Shining, but at the same time, they use elements like the heartbeat sound that Dick Halloran heard whenever Danny first contacted him at the Overlook is such it returns as like a motif throughout this entire film.
Yes.
It's very interesting. I think it's very well done.
Well, as it pans out before we kind of go to the next scene, we see a missing child poster for Violet Hanson, the little girl from the beginning.
Right.
So this is all happening concurrently. So in the next scene, Danny and Wendy are watching Bugs Bunny. which is something that they also did in The Shining. So that's canon.
She's enjoying it way more than he is.
She is. Danny sees the woman in the bathtub again and just bravely goes into the bathroom and locks her in that imaginary box.
Now, it doesn't say a word to his mom.
No.
Isn't like, excuse me, I gotta go take a shit or something. I gotta go take care of some business. No.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mom, I have to go take a shit.
Like,
Mommy.
no, he's like, you know what? It's not time for cartoons right now. I got
some business
I gotta do
to
this.
take care of.
Yeah.
And we see that his mind looks like the icy hedge maze from The
Right.
Overlook. So after he takes care of his business, he just sits back down with Wendy and finally starts talking to her again.
I just battled a ghost, no big deal.
I just
I'm
gotta
good.
go put
Yeah.
a bitch in a box. It's like, yeah.
So how are you
Thursdays,
doing?
right?
So now we jump into the future. And Dan,
Name change.
Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
yes, Dan Torrance wakes up after a long night of drinking. Mm-hmm. So the naked woman he wakes up to next to in bed has thrown up in the bed. This reminded me, and I'm not going to spoil anything because we're not covering it, obviously, but of a scene in The Stand, a Stephen King book. And I wonder if that was a nod
A
to
little
that.
homage. Dude, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Dan is like, fuck this. And he goes and vomits profusely
Yeah.
in the toilet in the bathroom. So he looks at himself in the mirror afterwards and notices a black eye and remembers, oh, I got into a fucking fight last night. Which, in another thing, again, that shows how much attention Mike Flanagan pays just to Stephen King, period. There's a line that Jack Torrance says a lot in The Shining that was not used in Kubrick's film, but every time he would get violent, he would say, it's time to take your medicine.
Damn.
And so Dan says that when he's fighting that dude at the bar.
That's like a pro
All
wrestler
right.
line for someone,
Yeah.
someone who's like Dr. Death or something.
Dr.
Time
Doom.
to take your medicine this Sunday.
Part of his promo.
Yeah.
But he says that when he's fighting the dude, and there's a girl that's really excited watching the
Yeah.
fight.
Oh, yeah. She loves it.
And this is the girl that I guess he goes home with, and then they're doing coke at her place, and then
He's living the good life. All right.
and then now we're here this morning. So he realizes that his money's gone and immediately takes the girl's money out of her wallet.
It's implied that she took his money. So he's no
he's
pun
reimbursing
intended, he's paying her back.
Yeah.
So he's just about to leave, and a little baby toddler comes out and is like, "Mommy," and it's like,
Ah, damn.
his diaper is like
No, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
saggy
pretty
and
bad.
soiled.
It's rough.
So he picks the baby up, gives him some Cheez-Its, and just puts him in the vomit bed with his mom.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm out. And Dick appears and is like, come on, bro.
Yeah, he does.
At least put the money back. And Dan's like, she took mine. So he doesn't put it
Yeah.
back.
No, he
Oh,
doesn't.
yeah.
It's like when I saw that, I was like, okay, so Halloran's going to be the spirit guide to these proceedings.
Yeah.
Or he's just going to be a dude that makes Dan feel like shit
Right.
for all his bad choices.
He's like, damn, man.
Yeah, again? He's just watching everything.
Yeah.
Don't fight that guy. God damn it.
Dan.
That's funny.
So now we're in Long Island, New York. And we see Andy, played by Emily Aylan Lind, sitting in a movie theater watching Casablanca. A man shows up and sits next to her. He says she's prettier than her picture. She says he's older. So it's like,
Yeah.
you already kind of see where this is going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rose is sitting and watching, eating popcorn a few rows back. And with her is the first guy that appeared in the woods when she was, schmoozing with Violet.
Right.
And it's Crow Daddy, played by Zane McClarnon.
I didn't remember it until you said it, but he was great in Fargo, the TV series.
Total badass in
I totally
Fargo.
forgot that
Yeah.
that was him. Both Rose and Crow are wearing hats in the movie theater. I can't imagine sitting behind them like,
Rude.
where are you in disguise? Take your fucking hats. I'm trying to watch Casablanca.
He, I guess, is showing Andy to Rose.
Right.
And Rose is like, well, she's not very steamy. And he's like, well, bitch, just wait a
Yeah.
minute. Like, check this out. He's seen her do this 3 times now. Andy tells this guy to go to sleep, and he immediately goes to sleep. And now Rose is like, she's finally a little interested. Andy takes his money and then starts cutting his face into 2 lines that I guess are supposed to mimic a snake bite.
Right.
Basically, she's like, well, you can explain a missing wallet, but, good luck explaining this.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that every time he sees himself in the mirror, he needs to say out loud, I like little girls, which is like, fuck.
Now, I have to say, while I enjoy this reboot of To Catch a Predator, I don't know why she had to eat his blood.
It was an odd choice.
Like, this dude's a creep.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even really think about it, but that was really weird.
It's a cool visual, I guess, that she's just like, it's just like the one last fuck you to this guy.
Yeah.
But you're eating his blood? I don't know.
Right? What if he's sick or
exactly,
something?
All these blood-borne pathogens.
And why does the dude look like Commissioner Gordon?
Don't taint Commissioner
I'm
Gordon.
Just saying. I was like, why?
No, he's gonna go back to work, put up the bat signal. He's like, look, we're gonna get this bitch.
Some shit happened, Bruce. Right, Batman, you got to help me.
He's like, she mugged me. All right, quit asking questions.
My question is, how are Rose and Crow hearing what she's saying?
Movie logic.
Because the whole time they're like, oh hell yeah. They're like into it.
The volume is turned up on them. Casablanca's turned down. Maybe it's part of their power. I don't know.
Maybe. Who the hell knows? So she leaves the theater. I guess her work is done.
Mm-hmm.
And Crow follows her out. And she tells him, you want to leave me alone. And he just stops. And so you're kind of like, oh.
Damn.
She told that guy, you want to go to sleep. He went to sleep. She tells Crow to, it's like, oh, okay, I see.
That's her power.
I see it. So Rose comes up and grabs her. And she's like, you want to let me go? And Rose is like, nah, I don't.
It
She's
doesn't
made
work
of stronger
that way.
stuff.
So yeah, we see that Rose is stronger and Andy's wiles aren't going to work on her.
What I don't understand is I still don't know what Crow does. Like, what's his power?
That's one of my critiques.
He's a scouter, I think.
Honestly, about kind of the entire film, because as we kind of get into the group, and we'll name them and everything later, the issue I have is that the only people that have any clear power are Rose the Hat and Rose the Hat.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you noticed that too, because I like the whole time, and we watched this a couple of times before.
Yeah.
Before this, and I thought the same thing. I was like, none of them have displayed anything.
No, they're just lucky that she let them.
And then if you guys all have this shine or some form of it or whatever, how is this little girl overpowering you when you've been doing this for how long?
Exactly.
Hang on. But
Come on,
somewhere
Crow,
else.
You got to do something else than that.
You look like a badass.
Yeah,
Fucking
He
handle
does
it.
look like a badass.
Yeah.
We see Dan wake up somewhere else, and the first thing he does when he wakes up is try to drink out of an empty
That
bottle.
dude stays fucked
Oh,
up.
yeah.
For real.
And it kind of pans out, and we see that he is just passed out under a bridge. Which, like, the 2 scenes that we've seen of adult Dan Torrance, God damn.
No, he's not leading his best life.
He's not.
It's had to be before he joined the Jedi Council.
It has to
It was before.
They wouldn't have let you.
Yeah,
Look,
they
dude, we can't give you
gotta
the force
clean up
if you.
before Sam Jackson's like, you can't come in here, motherfucker.
So now we flash to Anniston, New Hampshire, and we're at Abra's 5th birthday party.
Right.
She gives her mom a card that she made, and it just says hello, but there's a little smiley face in the
Right.
O. It's cute. So there's a magician at the party, and he's like making spoons float and shit, and he's pulling a rabbit out of his hat, and Abra goes, I can do magic too. And he's basically like, sure, Jan. Like, he's a very fucking dismissive.
Dude, he goes, that's nice, sweetie.
Yeah, he does.
She should be like, don't fucking patronize me.
So later on in the kitchen, there's silverware all over the floor, and it shows the ceiling, and all the spoons are floating on the ceiling. And her parents look fucking horrified.
Right.
And so Abra walks in and kind of looks proud of herself, and then sees her parents and is like, oh, like this isn't, you guys aren't happy about this.
Yeah.
All the spoons
Did she
clattered.
just want to impress the magician?
She wanted to impress her, but she was like, I told her I could fucking do magic.
Yeah, but who's gonna clean all that now?
Yeah, she's like, all right,
Yeah,
well,
who's it?
showed you. See you guys later.
Bye.
I got some dolls to play
clean
with.
this shit
It's
up.
my birthday. I don't have to fucking...
That's what kids do.
No.
And then you gotta wash all of them. It's
That's
like,
what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
those touch the floor.
Right, wash that shit. I don't go play outside.
And how lucky, I'm sorry, but she's clearly a rich kid, and she also gets some shine. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying.
So the spoons clatter to the floor, and somewhere else, it seems like the spoons falling wakes Dan.
Yeah.
And he's asleep on a bus. It wakes him up. Somewhere else, Rose senses a disturbance in the force when the spoons fall.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love it
Yeah.
because the way that Rose turns around, she's like,
What was
is
that?
this?
Yeah.
But then she shakes it off.
Yeah. Well, because she's got a conversation to have.
Yeah.
So she goes into her trailer and wakes up Andy, basically to say, I am impressed. You ran this scam on 6 men in the last 3 months. Mm-hmm. She says that Andy's a pusher and the group hasn't had a pusher in over 40 years. So it's like, what?
40 years?
Yeah.
You look like you're in your 30s.
Yes. So we find out that Andy is 15 years old. This is when Rose gives her kind of name for the group, which is Snake Bite Andy. She's 15, and Rose offers her eternal springtime, basically eternal youth.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, in 10 years, you'll still be 15. In 100 years, you might be 17. It's like,
Now,
oh, shit.
This doesn't seem like a good deal to me. I mean, maybe I'm thinking at it the wrong way, but when I was 15, I couldn't really have facial hair. And like, so if I'm 15 and then 100 years later I'm 17, I'm like, Rose, my shit's still wispy. Can you do something, please?
So she makes sure to stipulate, eat well, live long.
Right.
Very clear about that.
Yes. So now we're in Fraser, New Hampshire. And Dan's getting off the bus that we saw him riding on earlier, I guess, when the spoons woke him up.
Yeah.
And the bus is called Tet Transit. And again,
Yes.
not going to spoil anything, but that is a clear reference to the Dark Tower series.
Again,
Right.
Mike Flanagan, man.
Yes. And like you had mentioned earlier, as he's walking around, we hear his heartbeat.
Yes.
And I mean, that happens a lot in the movie, but every time I'm like, damn, like it's so good. So he sees a miniature town called Teeny Town.
The first shot of the town is eerie to me. I don't know if it's just because the music was playing, accompanying your first sight of
Right.
Teeny Town, but I was like, this is eerie. But it turns out not to be.
It's not.
No, not at all. At all.
But we meet Billy, who's played by Cliff Curtis.
No. Cliff Curtis is a great actor. Everything I've seen him in, I've appreciated him.
Even if the project wasn't
Exactly.
good. Yeah.
I was going to say he was in Fear the Walking Dead, and I'm so glad that he got out and that he's doing great films like this.
But Billy, I guess, helps keep up and maintain Teeny Town. I feel like he sees Dan and gets a read on him pretty immediately.
Right. Now, as we go on, I was wondering, honestly, if he has some
He
shine.
had something, yeah, because he immediately, and he's like, I know your look, but it was more than that.
Yeah,
I mean,
and especially in this universe, you can't say shit like that.
no, that's true.
You know?
And Dan looked beat the fuck up. He looked like a drunk
did.
that just got off of a bus who just got in a fight before he got off the bus.
All of the above is true.
But I can't even say in spite of this. I guess in spite of this, Billy goes out on a limb and gets him a room, I guess at the place that he's staying. He pays the first 2 weeks of rent for him.
$85 a week.
Yeah.
That's not a bad rate.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not
That's a
at
damn
all.
good rate.
No. I also want to mention that in this room, this apartment, whatever that Dan is renting, one of the walls is painted completely black and can be used as a blackboard.
Right, because of the previous resident
Right.
was a math teacher.
Yes. But I just want to, Billy is like, he stepped up for
No,
this
yeah.
dude
No,
that he
good
does
looking
not
out.
know at
You don't
all.
even know me.
And he's basically like, and tomorrow we'll figure out work for you. It's like he completely,
damn.
yeah.
Everyone needs a Billy in their life.
Yes, absolutely. So now we're at the beach, and apparently Andy has accepted the terms and conditions.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah. Rose introduces Grandpa Flick, who is played by Carol Struken, who played the Midnight Man in Gerald's Game.
He was also in Twin Peaks.
He was also in Twin Peaks.
Dude's a good actor. I like him a lot.
And for the first time, we hear the name of this group, which is the True Knot. What is tied cannot be untied.
Pretty neat.
Pretty neat.
I dig it.
So Rose feeds Violet's steam out of a canister to Andy.
I gotta be honest. At this point, I was a little confused
It's
because I
confusing.
didn't know what it was. I was like, "Is that smoke?" And she's like, "No, it's steam. Steam from the steamed girl. We're having steamed girl." No, but I was confused. I'll just say that. It makes more sense as it goes on.
Yeah, it's not something you see every day,
No.
so it is confusing.
And when Rose opens up the canister and she starts like sucking a bit of the steam in, Crow is looking on like, give me a slice.
You gonna share
Yeah,
that?
he's like, damn, that's tasty.
Well, so she gives it to Andy, and Andy is not as excited about the steam.
Not so much.
She's screaming and apparently writhing in pain, and then her eyes change to that glow.
Right. The
that Rose had.
Mini deadlights.
Yes, the mini deadlights. So in Dan's apartment, he wakes up and sees a fly, and he looks over, and there's a woman's arm draped over him with flies on it. He tries to get out of bed, and the arm grabs him. And we see her face, and it's the woman from earlier that he had gone home with.
Right.
That had puked in the bed and whatever. And she is quite dead.
Yeah.
Her face looks fucking disturbing.
It does. Her eyes are like milky.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she basically says that she left her baby home alone so often that the neighbors were all used to hearing him scream and cry. So nobody came to help.
So bad.
Yeah. She says they haven't found us yet. Like, we're dead and nobody has found us. And then we see the baby who's also dead
Yeah.
and turns around and goes, Mommy? Just like he did. It's a lot.
So here's my question here. I know that Dan has contacts in the spirit world and everything. Is this taken as proof that these two are actually dead?
That's how I took it. Yeah.
God damn.
So this is finally what prompts Dan to go to Billy's apartment and be like, I fucking need help.
Right. So, as much as he's following in Jack Torrance's footsteps of being an alcoholic, like it's kind of like this hereditary thing, at the same time, it's as if he is so afraid of using his power, the Shining, that he's drinking to suppress his ability.
Which is really sad.
So it seemed like what just caught up with him, he's almost realizing that, hey, maybe it's better to use it than to be whatever the hell I'm doing right now.
Because it's clearly not working.
No.
I didn't think about that, but that makes sense now why he's
Definitely.
drinking all the time.
Because you would think that he wouldn't at all after what he went through with
Right,
his dad.
right.
No, and it's interesting because as we go on, once he stops drinking, things
He
progress.
Right.
opens up.
Yes.
So Dan goes to an AA meeting with Billy. And that makes me wonder, is that how Billy knew,
Possibly,
maybe
maybe.
he had a similar
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
Which is pretty fucking amazing of him to pay it
man.
forward. Like, I really love Billy.
No.
But he stands up and Dan is recognized for 24 hours of sobriety. Billy introduces him to Dr. John, who's played by Bruce Greenwood. He led the meeting and basically vouches for Billy to be, a sponsor, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of says that he's a good dude. Mm-hmm. And as he's talking, Dan notices him feeling his wrist.
Yeah.
So Dr. John goes to leave and Dan kind of follows him and he's like, hey, so you left your watch at the hospital when you were visiting that little boy. What was the disease?
He kept saying, he was like,
Gauchers.
and he's like, Gaucher's disease.
Yeah.
And he's like, how the fuck do you know this?
Yeah,
His
he's like-
eyes looked in his
He's
eyes.
like,
Yeah.
that boy, when you were washing your hands, you left it on the hand dryer. So go check there. Wouldn't you be like, what the fuck?
No, and then he shakes his hand. He's like, great to meet you.
Have a
And then he
good-
leaves.
have a
He's
good
like, no, wait a second. I got a lot of questions. Luckily, we don't have to wait too long.
Yes. So in the next scene, he's in Dr. John's office, who, let's take a
Dude,
minute.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yes.
The setup of this scene is an exact, literally exact framing replica of Jack Torrance's interview with Mr. Ullman from The Shining.
When he took the job as the caretaker.
Yes, I mean the position of the desk where Danny
Yeah,
is sitting
everything
in
is like the
correlation,
exact same
the
office.
drapes.
Yeah.
The framing of the two actors to their
Yes.
respective cameras
Yeah.
is exactly the same.
There is a red binder on Dr. John's desk in the same position. There are teacups. There's an American flag.
Yes, the American flag,
It's
yes.
the same.
Yeah.
It's
the
like,
color of the walls.
and we had just watched The Shining for the episode that we did. And so seeing the movies back to back like that, it's like that had to be pretty painstaking. And for a pretty small percentage of people that would be paying attention enough to be like, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, even his nameplate looked to be the same
It's
font.
fucking- it's
like, I
just-
mean, it's unbelievable. And it's more to just the credit of Mike Flanagan.
All day.
Like,
All day. So anyway, John found the watch, and it was exactly where Dan said it was. And Dan's just basically like, oh, it was a lucky guess. It's like, there was no guess.
Dude,
Like,
and this is a testament to good writing to me, because when Dan said that, I was like, my ass. And then Dr. John goes, my ass.
yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how I felt.
So basically, John offers Dan a job as an orderly at a hospice. And interestingly, he's like, are you okay with death?
Yes. And then Dan says, well, we're all dying. And it reminded me of how Jack Torrance had an answer for every fucking question
his interview.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like,
right.
well, you got that from your daddy, dude.
Right.
That's natural.
You came
You know
by
what-
it honestly.
You know what you're doing.
So in the next scene, we're back on the beach, I guess, when Andy had her transformation.
Yeah. They're listening to a radio.
They're listening to a radio.
And the song playing on the radio is the song that played on the in the gold room.
Yep.
In The Shining. It's just
It did sound familiar.
Yep.
I was like, what kind of old shit are they listening to? But that's what it was.
Yeah.
So Andy tells Rose that it hurt and it felt
Yeah.
like she was dying. And Rose is like, well, you did.
You're like, wait, what?
And she goes, am I still human? And Rose is like, well, do you care? Which does not
No,
answer
yeah.
the question.
Terrible answer. And yes, I do care because I asked you about it.
Am I a human?
So I'm also confused because there's somebody in the back playing with the grill or cooking on the grill.
I didn't even
It's
notice
like,
that.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
neither.
so it's like, do you guys eat food or do you eat children? It's like,
I've-
which is it? It's
All
like,
of the above. I mean, I eat vegetables and meat, I guess.
you know what I mean?
No, but
I-
it's
yeah,
weird. Like, what satiates you? Is
At,
it?
well,
Yeah,
at
I
one point,
don't-
she's getting groceries.
Yeah.
Well,
And she has peanuts in her basket.
But it's just, you
we
know
like
what
to
I mean?
we like to snack. No, but just
weird.
because we're psychic vampires doesn't
Yeah,
mean we like to,
right.
we
You don't like to
snack.
nosh. I mean, come
Yeah.
on.
You ever had a Cheez-It?
And then another one is just playing with the gun or cleaning a gun, just sitting back there. And it's like,
Just hanging out.
if you
Yeah.
if you guys have these powers, why do you need a firearm for? Can't you just stop somebody?
Hey, we'll get to that in a minute because there's a big deal that I want to talk about with that exact point.
All right.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that
No,
noticed it then. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
All right. So in the next scene, we're at the hospice, and Dan has accepted the job as an orderly, and he's mopping the floor, and I guess the communal cat,
right.
Well, it's
Azzy,
It's funny because the cat looks like it was pushed into the scene.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed.
Yeah.
They're like,
Didn't.
you're on. This is
Right.
your cue. The cat's like, oh shit. Sorry.
Go, cat, go.
Yeah.
Azzy goes inside a patient's room, and Dan goes in to get the cat out, and the patient goes, Doc? Which, A, he could be mistaken for a doctor, but B, like,
Right.
they called him Doc.
It's,
Right,
it's
right.
his
Parents
nickname.
called him Doc. Yeah, Dick calls him Doc.
Mm-hmm.
So the patient, when Dan's trying to get the cat out, he's like, no, that means it's time. Like, the cat always knows, you know, whose turn it is, and
Yeah.
basically it's mine.
I read that aside from all the questions that Stephen King would get about, well, where's Danny Torrance now and all that stuff, one of the main reasons he wrote this novel is because he read a story, not a fictional story, a true story about an old folks home that had a cat. And when he would go into people's
Wow.
rooms, they would be found dead the next morning. Like the cat knew that they were about to die.
Cat was
Or
killing
maybe
him.
the cat was killing him.
Yeah, nobody
Cat was
suspects
killing
the
him,
cat. Yeah, so that was kind
They
of
think I'm a genius.
a few of the jumping off points that made him write Dr. Sleep.
Wow.
And so that's kind of where this came
That's
from, was an
interesting.
actual
That
true
is
story.
interesting.
That's interesting.
But the patient says that, I mean, I guess basically he's ready, but he's just scared that it's going to hurt. And Dan tells him it's not going to hurt. It's just like going to sleep.
Right.
And he calls Dan Dr. Sleep.
Right.
Roll credits.
Where he get
Yeah.
So then the patient exhales steam and dies.
So, two things here. One, he called him Doc.
Uh-huh.
He knew about the cat and its powers. And then Dan was able to talk to him in his mind.
Yes.
So this old man had the Shining.
He had the shine,
Right.
yeah.
And I honestly don't think he thought he was a doctor. I think he
He
knew.
was calling him
Oh,
Doc.
yeah.
And honestly, this might sound...
That gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, me too. I don't know why. This might sound weird, but I think the cat also has the Shining.
No, I think he does too.
Right?
I think all cats have the shining, to be honest.
Doesn't he tell him though? He's like, "You're exactly where you're supposed to be."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he
So-
said, yeah.
Yeah, so you're probably right. He did. He knew he had something. He knew something.
And the fact that he had steam at all. He
Yeah,
has to.
no, yeah.
That's a really like beautiful scene, honestly.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
And there's another one like it that every time that I've watched it, it's almost made me want to cry.
Really?
Yeah. It's like the power that Dan has. This is perfect. Like this is just
Yes.
the perfect. He's exactly where he should be. Like it's just perfect for him.
The old man is right.
Yeah. In his moment of fear, Dan used his power to comfort
Right.
him. It's just really beautiful.
And it's a good character moment for Dan because
Yes.
it's like,
yeah,
look,
yeah.
this power doesn't always have to be fucking
Yeah.
locking up monsters.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
You
scary.
can comfort people. You can help people. And it kind of fits in with what Dick was telling him earlier. He's like,
Yeah.
look, you're going to need to do what I did for you.
Yeah.
And maybe he's seeing like, okay, well, shit, maybe I can.
It doesn't all have to be bad.
Yeah.
So Dan comes home to his apartment, and written on that chalkboard wall is the word hello with a smiley face in it, just like on the card that Abra had made for her mom. So he takes a piece of chalk and writes hi back. And then in her room, we see,
How do you know it wasn't the landlady?
right?
Just want to check in.
We see the little girl Abra giggle and then roll over and go to sleep. So now we jump forward 8 years.
Was not expecting that.
No. And I think this is when they shave Dan's beard.
I think so.
And I'm like, when guys get their shit together, they can have a beard then too. Like, the clean shaven face doesn't mean, oh, he's got his life on track. Like, good men have beards. I'm sitting with 2 of them right now.
Well, thank you. I will say, though, I do have a beard and I do not have my life on track.
It goes both ways, damn it. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, Dan is receiving his 8-year chip in AA. And for his speech, he talks about Jack and said that he got to know him best through his drinking, which is really fucking sad.
It's- yeah.
And that Jack had only gotten his 5-month chip and that he would have liked to be where Dan is now with his 8-year chip.
Yeah.
And so he dedicates his chip to his dad who tried to kill him. So it's like a really powerful moment. Mm-hmm. Later at the hospice again, Dan has kept this job this entire time. And as he goes into another patient, and we see Dan much more comfortable with his role as Dr. Sleep.
It's like his second position at the
Yes.
place.
And the patient says that he's afraid of there just being nothing. And Dan's like, no, we go on after.
Yeah.
And starts talking about the patient's house and people that he knew. And he says that he can taste his mom's blueberries that she used to grow. And Dan's like, I can taste them too. And then they start singing a song that Dan talks about hearing playing on the radio. And the scene kind of fades with the old man singing it. And it chokes me up every time I see it.
I don't
It's
know.
just-
It's very comforting. It's
It
sad, but
is.
it's
But
sad
it's
in a
sweet.
beautiful way.
Yeah.
Right.
So back at Dan's apartment, Morning is written on the wall with a smiley face and the O.
Yeah. So this has been going on for years.
8 years now. And Dan writes back, school. And back at Abra's house, she's 13 years old now, and her mom is calling her for school.
So this time has passed. How did she find him anyway in the first place?
No, that's a great question.
I mean, there's
He-
no kind of connection there, right? I
Well-
I feel like after he stopped drinking, he's shown brighter, A, and B, I don't know.
all right.
So now we're at the True Knot camp, and Crow is looking for Rose, and he stops to ask Grandpa Flick if he's seen her, and Grandpa Flick is like coughing and clearly fucking sick.
Right.
Yeah.
And he says he's fine, but he's not
Yeah,
fine. Crow finds Rose sitting on top of the trailer in like a meditation pose, and kind of vaguely says, oh, I think he is somewhere in Iowa, and we'll take a road trip when I'm sure I've found him. And we don't know what the
We're like,
hell
what
he's
are you
talking
talking
about.
about?
But Crow's basically like, we need to open up a canister of the steam. And he's like, it's been 6 months, and that steam was weak sauce.
Yeah.
So we're already feeling the effects of not eating, I guess, or drinking or whatever the
Right,
fuck they do
right.
with the steam.
Inhaling.
And Grandpa Flick is looking pretty rough. And Rose clearly does not want to open a canister and is like, well, we're closing in on what?
Yeah, maybe she's sneaking some on her own.
She's like,
I'm
well,
fine.
That's
Yeah,
why
right,
she's
I'm
stronger than
good,
everybody
yeah.
else.
Exactly.
She's like, well, I don't want to waste it if we're closing in on a kill. And Crow's like, I might not be able to find him if we don't have some.
I was kind of bummed because as I was watching this, because it's Flanagan, I'm looking for Easter eggs. I saw that Rose is wearing a shirt that says Red Clay Strays. And I was like, ooh, what Stephen King reference is this? So I look it up and it's just a band from like Alabama, like a real band. And it's even a modern band. So I was like, damn it. So it doesn't even show her age. It's
Never mind.
Yeah, they have a song on the soundtrack as well. It's in the movie. So I was like, all right, that's fair enough, I guess.
That's pretty cool, actually.
I
Yeah,
also looked and tried to find anything.
Uh-huh.
And again, somebody's working on the grill. No smoke, no fire, no food, nothing. They're just pushing around with a spatula. There's nothing there.
That's how they cook.
What if before they joined the True Knot, all they did was barbecue and they're like, look, I'm just going to fucking do that.
It's muscle memory.
Not for real, yeah. It's my hobby. She meditates, I fucking mess with the grill.
Right.
So Crow brings up the troubling, for them, notion that there's just less steam in the world. And he attributes this possibly to cell phones, diets, or Netflix.
A little too modern for my taste. You guys are on the road. What do you know of Netflix?
Right. I thought that was a little odd, but Rose doesn't want to admit that there's less steam in the world. And Crow's like, well, you know it's true.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, are we low? Is that why you don't want to open one? And she's like, no. So begrudgingly, she opens one. And it looks mostly stocked in their little cooler.
I understand wanting to keep some reserves.
Yeah, but she does get one. And she opens it up, and Crow leads Grandpa Flick to drink first. But then everybody storms in and starts drinking. Except Rose.
I know, Rose does not. And this is a very good character moment for Rose, because it's like, look, I take care of mine.
Yeah.
This isn't about me. I wasn't the one that ate first. I didn't eat it all.
And it kind of speaks to the group because they lead the oldest and weakest
First. And
yeah.
you're like, you know what?
It's a community.
They're doing some bad shit, but they're not all bad.
They love each other.
There's some...
Unless she's taking some off the top.
You
which we don't know.
You are committed to this theory.
I'm just saying.
I trust Rose the Hat.
You might not want to do that. I'm sorry. What? I didn't watch the end of this movie.
Yeah, I stopped watching at this moment. It's like, damn, she's a good person. Click.
And I'm done.
Yeah.
So soon we see who the him that Crow was talking about is. The next scene, we're at a baseball game, and the kid in question, Brad, played by Jacob Tremblay, is playing, and he's number 19, which again is a direct reference to the Dark Tower series.
Yeah, I thought that was neat.
It might sound ridiculous that a number is a reference to, but it is. It is.
Right.
So a guy in the crowd is saying how great number 19 is, and it's like he can read the pitcher's mind.
Yeah.
So the boy clearly has The Shining. But the guy that is saying this in the crowd is Danny Lloyd, who played Danny Torrance in Kubrick's The Shining. Yeah. Which is like, that's
so
fucking
cool.
cool.
That's
Yeah.
really cool.
I read that he's a teacher now. And Mike Flanagan...
Wouldn't it be crazy if your fucking teacher was Danny
absolutely.
Torrance?
Yeah, no.
Mike Flanagan cast him in this cameo role via Twitter.
Oh my God.
He reached out to him on Twitter, and I guess he was like, sure.
That's so cool.
And I'm sure it was a blast.
Oh, yeah.
That's so cool. But in the crowd, we see Crow sitting there and watching.
He's like, found you.
Yeah, is anybody like, who's your
guy?
kid? Yeah.
My kid. Oh, number 19.
Yeah, right.
I say that because it's obvious that his parents weren't there because...
Yeah, because after the game, he's walking alone on a long-ass road next to a fucking cornfield.
Yeah, it's like, first of all, your kid's apparently a baseball phenom. You don't want to come support that?
Come cheer him
Not
on.
only
Yeah.
that, wouldn't the school have taken them? Don't they
Yes,
have buses
that
for
was the
that?
other-
And they...
I literally wrote
He
that
needed
down.
the fresh air.
I'm like,
damn
it's
it.
either his parents took him
yeah.
or he rode with the entire team. Why is he walking home in a
Yeah.
cornfield? Children of the Corn?
Yeah.
All right. Isn't that more Stephen King?
It's a reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we said, he's walking home alone, and the group's RV pulls up, and Barry, played by Robert Longstreet, who was also in The Haunting of Hill House. There's that actor is very magnetic, and I feel like I've only seen him in these two things, but he's really good.
Yeah. Get him more work.
Please, Mike, come on.
Yeah.
But he's basically like, you know what, how they warn you not to engage with a stranger in school? Like, he's basically doing that.
He's breaking all the rules.
Yeah. But then Andy opens the door and is like, you trust us. You want to get in the car. And he's like, I want to get in the car. So he does.
Again, though, what are his mutant powers? Why can he not stop?
They said that he can read the pitcher's mind. So he's using his shining
So couldn't
to
you
play.
read their mind and be like, oh shit, they're going to kidnap me and run away?
Not if they're aware of it.
Yeah.
And they're like thinking pink elephants, puppies,
Yeah.
puppies, corn.
But that just makes it. See, I don't like that. That's not, I'm going to kill you and drink your steam but you're the whole time. It's like, no, don't think about it. Baseball. It's like, come on.
But the thing is
Court.
Yeah, that's.
We don't know the rules, okay?
I know, but I'm just saying.
Andy worked quick. She got to him quick.
But I feel like he would have had enough time to be like, wait, you're thinking something wrong, and then be like, oh shit, and take off running.
Well, but like Crow was actively pursuing her, and it still didn't work on him. Like, he was focused, and he knew what she was capable of doing,
that good.
and it still didn't work on
and
him.
he's Crow, and he's been
but
around.
She didn't come out first, though.
Brad
the
is a
fat
little
guy
boy.
did.
Yeah, but it still worked.
So why wouldn't you be able to read his mind and be like, you're going to try to kidnap me, and
it's
him
not
take off?
necessarily mind reading.
But
because
you just said that he can tell what the pitcher's doing.
Well,
so we're
but
maybe he gets a feeling or something.
Yeah, because the thing is that they mentioned it very early on that a lot of people have shine, but they don't even know it. So he could be
maybe
like,
he could just
damn,
get a
I just
feeling.
fucking rule at baseball and not even think beyond
and
that.
that's the only way,
I
the only time that
guess.
he's tapped into it.
I want to see them fly or do something crazy. I don't want to.
And I kind of appreciate that there are different levels.
Yeah.
Because I feel like this movie would make no sense if everybody had the same amount of shine and the same amount of resources.
I get that.
He's grade one
get
shine.
It. Yeah,
he's grade one
I
shine.
get it.
So that night, the group is in like I don't even know what, like an industrial, like.
Yeah,
it's like almost like a construction situation.
Almost, yeah.
Like a mill or something.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
And Barry carries Brad over to the group and drops his catcher's mitt.
Mm-hmm.
And Brad is screaming and begging, and they tie him up to the ground.
Right.
Rose introduces the fact that pain and fear purify steam.
So again, it's very reminiscent of Pennywise because he liked to get the kids good and scared before he took
it only worked
took
if
a bite.
they were scared. Yeah.
And to me, it's this creation of this universe that Stephen King is making. It's like all the monsters, they feed on fear, literally.
Yeah, which is really scary.
Oh yeah, so just don't be afraid of anything.
Yeah,
and
never
you're
be scared.
cool.
So in that vein, she tortures him, and every time he screams, steam comes out, and they are hungry. They're just lapping it up. While this is happening, Abra wakes up, disturbed, and she can, I guess, see this happening and yells at them to stop. And Rose feels her. Mm-hmm. Abra falls to her bed and is screaming, and her parents rush in. And words explode, like not drawn on the chalkboard, but etched into Dan's wall. He wakes up and looks into his mirror, reflecting the wall, and it says red rum.
Right.
He turns around and looks at the wall, and it says murder, which is the exact opposite of what Wendy did in The Shining. She saw red rum and then looked in the mirror and saw murder. So that was another great
little
moment. Yeah. So he writes who? And she writes back, baseball boy. I should be like, what the fuck?
It's a superhero.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the True Knot kills Brad and collects the rest of his steam.
He's good to the last drop.
Apparently, yeah.
Now, I will say his team is going to take a hit this season.
Oh, no.
Going to handle
He was their
more
ace.
losses than they expected.
All right. They use that kid as a bong, man.
So they bury him, and Rose tells Crow that someone on the East Coast was watching them, and they have huge steam, and that she's going to be ready for them next time.
Right. Also, about Dan, his landlady is going to be pissed about that wall.
That's the first thing I thought, because that lady was
I
so
thought that
rich.
too.
Yeah. It's like, fuck. You should be writing an apology instead of, what boy?
So the next day, Dan writes, "Hope you're okay, your friend Dan," on the wall. And Abra goes downstairs and says, "I made a new friend named Dan." So I guess they've never exchanged names this whole 8 years. So her mom basically is like, "Are we not going to talk about that shit last night?" And she says that she knows that Abra's head is like a radio and sometimes weird stations come in. And Abra's like, no, not anymore. Like, no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
That it's not like she can turn it off.
No. And
you know what I mean?
It like, I feel like this is really like almost powerful because when you're a kid or when you're interacting with a kid, there's so much subtle stuff that you can do that makes them think, oh, this is okay, or oh, this is unacceptable, or oh, this is weird. And so I feel like that scene that we had seen with the spoons, Abra was like, okay, they don't like this. This isn't okay. And I'm sure there were other instances like that as she was growing up. And she's like, well, I'm just going to hide this. They don't want to know about this, so I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to share this with them.
They're aware of it enough to where when those things happen, they're not like, what the fuck is wrong with our kid? They know enough, but like you're saying, it's kind of like a...
uncomfortable. Like, they're not happy about it.
Right. I know it'd be creepy, but wouldn't you be like, can you give me the lotto numbers? Like,
how far can we take this?
Yeah, use that shine of yours.
So Abra goes to the library and is reading everybody's mind, including one little girl who calls her a freak.
Yeah.
She's looking through a missing child site and she finds a picture of Brad, so she finds his name. She goes back home and we find out that her dad is writing a book.
Yeah.
And I felt like this was another interesting parallel because Dan's dad was writing a book as well. Clearly their dads are very different.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Still.
Her dad seems very kind.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting. Abra goes to her room and kind of focuses on Brad's picture, like Life is Strange style. And
she's got to line up those sticks.
Yeah. And she can see Barry in the van. And her eyes go white and she sees everything. And she sees that they killed Brad at Lemerck Industries, which is another Dark Tower reference. Abra starts floating next to her window.
Yeah.
And I guess Astral projects herself to where Rose is. And this is when she is grocery shopping and getting her peanuts and whatnot.
What a life.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we go across the country, eat some kids, and then also we need peanuts.
I want a snack.
Yeah.
So Rose senses her and kind of reaches back behind herself to where she's touching Abra's head.
Right.
And Abra forces her out of her head. Rose is standing like by a dairy case and the case explodes. And Rose is like pushed back, like sliding on the floor.
Yeah.
And her nose is bleeding. We go to Dan, who has passed out at an AA meeting.
Yeah, I didn't understand this. I didn't know if he also was privy to what just happened.
I think he was affected by it, like when the spoons fell. They're all connected.
Right.
And so when she really violently affected Rose,
it like sent a
he
shock
got
through the
some
whole
of it.
system.
Yeah. But Billy wakes him up and is like, who's Tony? Because you were asking him for help.
Yeah.
Which is like fucking sad.
Yeah.
In the Shining movie, because it's different in the book.
Right.
Dan talked to his imaginary friend, Tony, and Tony was actually the Shining. He just didn't realize what was happening and interpreted it as an imaginary friend. So the fact that he has almost regressed to calling upon him is like, it's like he's being affected by the Shining as he did when he was a child. Like, it's like the strength of it is new almost. So that night, Rose goes back to their camp or compound and tells Crow what happened. And she said nobody has ever been able to do that to her. And Crow's like, well, instead of...
Well, Crow goes, bullshit. It's like, you don't believe her?
Her nose is literally still bleeding.
Like, what the fuck?
So...
The one thing, too, I got out of this, they never use their real names.
No.
So all I could think was, oh, we're using our made-up names now from Spider-Man. And I was like, why is nobody calling the only, there's no names.
No, she calls him Crow Daddy. She's not
just
look, Steve.
Yeah. But, I mean, even their little community thing is weird because they got some weird...
Oh, you mean coupling?
Yeah.
No, yeah.
How is it, like, I thought you guys were a family.
Well, clearly, Rose and Crow are romantically involved with each other.
There.
And in the book, it's Rose and Crow and Rose and Andy.
She's busy.
She's busy, yeah.
Damn.
But Crow is the main. Crow's the OG. So he broaches the subject of turning Abra like they did with Andy instead of eating her, basically.
Right.
And Rose is like, no, nobody with that power should be in the group. Which is like pretty fucked up.
I think that's some jealousy. She's like,
yeah.
look.
No, yeah.
No, she's the only person she's met that's stronger than her.
Exactly. She's like, I'm king shit and I will remain king shit.
Period.
Until.
So the next day, Abra's mom drops her off at school, but she leaves and catches the bus.
And no teacher or nobody
No.
just, hey,
No.
what are you doing, little
No.
girl?
Or anyone on the bus.
Yeah.
Shouldn't you
This
be
is
in school, little
Well,
girl?
parents too.
Unaccompanied
Parents see her just
child.
walk away.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna be like, "Hey, that's such and such daughter." Like,
Yeah.
not everybody, because we know some parents that
Yeah,
go to
we
school with
do.
the kids. If you seen their kid walk off, wouldn't you be like, "Hey,
Where are you
isn't that-
going?"
Yeah, what are you doing?"
They
It's
should
like, I
have
know
blown
you're
up her spot and just been like,
Something.
"Oh no, Abra, school's that way."
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. You got it.
Turn around.
Yeah,
That way.
There you go.
So she arrives at Teeny Town and sees Dan, and he sees her, but he's like, what the fuck? And just keeps going about his business until she says hi in his mind.
right.
And so he goes over to her and they sit on a bench together. And it's the same position as when they were sitting on the bench earlier. But Abra is in young Danny's spot and Dan is in Dick's spot.
He's fulfilling
Huh.
exactly.
Yes, it's like it's
I didn't
Danny,
even catch
or
that.
Dan
Yeah, I
has
didn't
come
even
full
catch
circle.
that.
He tells her that this looks weird because he's a grown man and she's a teenage girl.
Well, yeah.
Not wrong.
Not wrong.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, if anybody asks, you're my uncle, your Uncle Dan. So he basically does what Dick did for him and explains to her that he calls it The Shining and that when he was little, he thought that it was Tony. And she's like, well, I thought you were an imaginary friend.
Because in all fairness, he has physical proof of their contact. She doesn't.
She doesn't. It's all in her head.
Yeah.
So finally she gives him the photo of Brad and she's like, now just go to Iowa and find his body.
Yeah.
And
I
if
got
you,
a tiny town to take care
All
of.
right, hold on.
If you-
What kind of time you think I have, little girl?
if you bring me back the mitt, I'll find Barry because Barry was wearing it. Dan is immediately like,
Some dangerous talk there.
Yeah.
absolutely not. Hide your fucking shine. This shit is dangerous.
Yeah.
Go home. Leave it alone. Just stop.
It begins and ends very similarly to the conversation that Danny had with Halloran, where it's like, look, this is what The Shining is. Stay out of room 237.
Yeah.
Don't fucking go in there. He's like, look, this is what The Shining is. Stay away from the True Knot. Don't fuck with them.
He basically tells her to shut it
Exactly.
down. Like, just
Exactly.
don't
Don't
leave it
even-
alone. So at the hospice, Azzy goes into a different room and Dan is like, oh, like you have your wires crossed. There's nobody in there.
The shot of the hallway is the same shot as when Danny rounds the corner and sees the twins. It's that shot, like, perfectly. It's so weird for something as mundane as a hallway to be iconic.
Yeah, but it is.
But it is. And you're like, just this small thing. Also, I read that whenever he is working as the orderly, he's reading the same magazine that Jack was reading
Oh
in
my
the Overlook. Like, it's just these small things. If you're paying attention, it just lifts
That's
this
cool.
movie even more.
Yeah.
That's insane. But Dan goes into the room and there isn't a patient, but there's someone standing inside. And so Dan's like, I got fucking ready.
Got just the box
Yeah.
for you.
He starts getting his box ready and then he realizes that it's Dick and he's happy to see him. Apparently, Dick hasn't visited since he stole that woman's money.
Right. He's like, I can't watch this shit.
I'm done.
Yeah.
So he tells Dick that he hasn't seen an Overlook ghost in years and that the last one was Derwent, the guy that goes, great party, isn't it?
Yeah.
He asks what happens to the ghost that he locks up. And Dick, just like Rose earlier, is like, do you care? It's like, yes.
Yeah, it kind of matters, man.
I do. So Dick tells him Ka is a wheel.
Yes.
A
It is a wheel.
direct Dark Tower reference. And he tells Dan that he needs to help Abra. And to put it all into perspective, which this really does, he goes, you just walked into my kitchen and I'm still on the hook.
Yeah.
Like, you just dropped into my life. You don't get to say, oh no, shut it down. We're not doing this.
Yeah.
Which I was like, damn, like,
That's
that's
fair.
true. He died for him.
You gave him ice cream, too.
He did give him ice cream. Which is more important? I don't know.
Yeah.
He tells Dan that this world is just a dream within a dream for him and that this is his last dream. He's not going to see him again.
He doesn't even say goodbye.
No.
I thought that was very odd. He's like, you won't see me again. And he's like,
Well, he tells him that he grew up fine, but he still has a debt to pay. And then he is gone.
Yeah.
I feel like there could have been a better goodbye.
A nicer conclusion because
Right.
he seemed mildly pissed the
He
whole
did.
time.
It's like, so the last time I see you, you're just fucking miffed at me? That's how you want to leave things?
So at Abra's house, her mom goes to check on her because she didn't come down for dinner. And she says that she's going to visit her mom, who is sick. And this is what's kind of fucked up, is apparently Abra has picked up every cue that makes her feel like her shine should be suppressed. But her mom's like, is she going to pull through this time? So it's like, you can't have it both ways.
And she wants it both ways.
She wants it both ways.
It's like the lottery numbers, like JP was saying. Like, you can't just do it for just the things that you
Yes.
want and then make her feel like shit for
Yes.
something she can't control.
And I feel like Abra knows that no.
She's not going to pull through.
But she's like, I don't know. I hope so. Like,
Yeah.
again, just
Yeah.
playing the role, I guess. So, back at their camp, Rose goes back on top of the RV to focus. And in this really fucking cool looking scene, she projects herself and is floating alongside the earth.
It looks so good.
Yes.
And there's more later, but this scene in particular, I was really, really kicking myself for not going to see it in the movie theater.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this would look
It would have been fucking
amazing
great.
on
that
a
would have looked cool.
massive screen.
And we hear her heartbeat. So it's another, you know.
Yeah.
So she lands like a fucking cat on Abra's street. She sees her house and then flies into her room.
Their house, the address is 1980, whatever street they're on. 1980 is the year of Kubrick Shining that it came out.
I didn't even notice that.
Just want to point that out.
She sees file drawers. Cabinets, thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
It's all right.
And she says that they're Abra's memories, and she opens one and kind of starts leafing through it. And suddenly there's a spotlight on her, and the door slams hard on her hand. Mm-hmm. Abra appears, and she has no eyes, and she's wearing a short, like, purple bob wig.
Master of Disguise.
And she was prepared because Dan had told her, look, they're going to be coming back. Like, they're not done with you. Mm-hmm. Abra starts rifling through Rose's mind, which
And
looks like, it's very different.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It looks like Victorian,
Yes.
like a library.
Yeah.
Also, very, very much reminded me of my favorite part of Dreamcatcher.
I thought about Dreamcatcher
Another
too.
Stephen King vehicle where they kind of keep all their memories filed away in
boxes.
physical
Yeah.
boxes inside their mind. Also, Rose was getting pretty pissed off about her going through the file. She's like, those are my naked drawings of Cleopatra or whatever. I don't know. She's like
Get
so
out of
mad.
there.
Yeah. She has been
So-
around forever is what I'm trying to say.
Rose, to get away from Abra, pulls her hand out of the drawer along with some skin. Like,
Yeah,
it is
that looks
fucking
brutal.
It's pretty bad.
So she flies out of the room and into her own body and lands so hard that she falls off the roof of the
That
IV,
shot's incredible.
the RV.
Yeah.
It really is. And her hand is fucked up.
It is.
It looks bad.
It
Yes.
does. It's like, so when you astral project, it's like some Freddy Krueger shit.
It happens in
You
real
know,
life.
you actually, yeah.
Can we mention this lady's catchphrase constantly? Well, hello there, or hi there. It's
Yeah.
just through the
It's
whole
her
movie.
thing.
Yeah, it's
I
like,
like
so
it.
that's your bad
No.
guy catchphrase.
Yeah.
That's
Hey.
what.
So?
Yeah,
I gotta be honest, I love it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
point out that
No,
it's
she
like,
says it quite a few
it's
If,
times.
a lot.
if they merchandised a Rose the Hat doll and you pulled
There-
the
yeah.
string,
That might
well,
be
hello
her.
there.
That might
The
be
doll.
her first line when she
I think
sees
it
Violet.
is.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, you're
like
totally
the
right.
crusty doll, huh? You pull the back.
So she's pissed,
Mm-hmm.
and she's talking to Crow, and Barry comes up, and they're like, get the fuck out of. And he's like, no, like, you need to come because Grandpa Flick is cycling, he says. Mm-hmm. And he looks very upset, and so we can kind of infer what that means. And from her bed, Abra is mentally telling Dan, I got in her mind, like, it was fucking,
Yeah.
she doesn't say that, but
Yeah,
I got in her mind,
yeah.
So he gets up and goes to write on the chalkboard, and he's like, no. And he talks back to her in her
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
And she hears him. Back at the campsite, Flick is dying because they haven't fucking been eating.
Yeah.
That little bit of steam did not go
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
far.
He says that he's scared, and Rose talks this dude up.
Man,
He's seen empires rise and fall. They've made statues and myths of him. He eats fear. You're not
Right,
scared.
Right, right.
she pulls a Dr. Sleep.
She
Yeah.
does. Oh my God.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
So for the first time, we see one of the True Not die, and it's not pretty.
No, the effects are very interesting.
Yeah.
Like he's aging off and on.
Yeah.
Off and
Yeah,
on,
it's
yes.
like time is catching up with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. As
And
he's
he's
breathing
screaming.
in and
Yeah.
screaming
And,
yeah.
and that change happens every time he breathes. I feel like in other movies he would explode,
Yeah.
Right.
but he just dissipates.
He like vaporizes.
Yeah, into a cloud of steam, and they all drink him.
I was like, you better not waste that steam.
Right, let's eat Grandpa.
Yeah. Is what he would have wanted.
Right.
So at Dan's apartment, and this is more fucking points for Billy, man. Dan goes to see him at 4 a.m. and basically asks if he trusts him. And he's like, look, I got some shit to tell you, and you just got to believe me.
Yeah.
And Billy fucking does.
Yeah, that's a
he
hell of
does.
a guy right
Yeah.
there.
But we see Dan driving the car, and Billy is asleep in the passenger seat.
He's a ride or die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
he
yeah.
is. Abra appears in the back seat, and she tells him how mad and scared Rose was and that we're all libraries on the inside. And she's like, see? And she goes inside Dan's mind, and Dan almost fucking loses control of the car.
Right.
And she apologizes, and she sees the overlook in his
Right.
mind. We see the typewriter and the hedge maze, and he tells her that the overlook eats like the true knot. So at the camp, Crow tells Rose that they found her. He's like, but you don't need to come because
No.
she does not look happy. He says basically that Abra probably can track her or sense her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, in all seriousness, you got your ass kicked last time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so maybe sit
yeah.
this one out.
Yeah.
It's night now, and Billy is driving, and Dan is openly talking to Abra in the back seat as she tells him where to go. Mm-hmm. And Billy is just, all right.
Yeah,
Like,
I
this
guess
is-
this is what it is.
they find the site and they get ready to dig, and Dan tells Abra to leave, which is probably a good call. Mm-hmm. Billy tells a story while they're digging about going deer hunting and seeing a deer disappear only to find it dead the next day, and it looked like it had been dead for days. So again, I feel
like
more,
he's got some shine.
But he says that the way that deer smelled is what he's smelling now. And so they find Brad, and Billy immediately throws up.
Oh, I
like,
think
what?
I would too. That,
You ain't never seen a steamless boy before?
Right? So they drive back, and the shot again is very reminiscent of The Shining.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan tells Abra that he needs to tell her parents because Rose will go through them to get to her. Well, they pull up at Abra's house, and her dad almost fucks Dan up.
He does on sight.
yeah.
Understandably.
Well, no, yeah. I don't think
Well-
I'd be very happy either.
I've been talking. He said, I told you to show him. She didn't show him. She told him. I've been talking to a guy that I call Uncle Dan, and what the fuck does that sound like?
No,
Well,
yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's Abra's fault.
And no, it is.
No, yeah.
Like, and if I'm Dan, I'm like, we're talking later because that dude, that's fucked up.
Well, he was like, I told you to show him. So she does, and her dad collapses in the driveway.
Yeah.
And finally is ready to listen
Wow.
And
after
then next scene, he's drinking some whiskey.
after he goes inside and gets himself a drink.
Yeah.
Dan tells Abra's dad that the police aren't going to help, and he gives Abra the mitt, the glove,
Right.
baseball glove. So she immediately sees them in the van and says that they're on I-95 and they're getting closer. And Dan tells them to let them track her because they're going to play a trick on them.
Right.
And she's like, a magic trick? Like, she's still a
She
fucking
loves it,
kid.
yeah.
So the next scene, they're in the car, and Abra's in the back seat and says that they're following him, and Dan's like, just focus. So they drive over a bridge, and it is the sound of Danny's big wheel
Yes.
going over the wood floor in the
Yeah.
overlook. It's like, fuck, man.
Easter eggs for days.
God.
This movie is just.
Yeah, it's good.
So they go to a rest stop, I guess, and the True Knot rolls up on their spot.
Oh,
all right?
yeah.
And Abra is sitting at a picnic table just waiting for them. They approach, and Barry straight up has a gun behind his back.
Andy has a syringe.
Yeah.
I'm like, so you're telling me that you know everything this girl's capable of, but you brought a gun and a syringe to the fight? That's
Well,
what you did?
I think that her bringing the syringe is her admitting I don't fucking know.
All right, fair enough.
I was gonna say that she can't put her to
Well-
sleep, but she still does try to put her to sleep.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know.
Well, she says the way they talked you up, I thought this was going to be harder.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like
Well-
this was poor planning on the True
Yeah.
Knot's part.
Yeah.
But yeah, she does say, I thought this was going to be harder. She uses her pushing and puts Abra to sleep and then stabs her in the neck with that syringe.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, and then looks back, and she has just sedated Abra's stuffed bunny.
Now,
They got.
they got, but I do have a problem here. I love movies like this with little moments where, like, say one character is a ghost and then you go back and watch it and you're like, oh, holy shit, they never did look at that person or whatever, right? Well, whenever Billy, Dan, and Abra arrive at the rest stop, Dan opens the door for Abra.
I didn't even notice that, really?
I didn't either,
And
and
that
I
shouldn't
got
have
nothing to
happened.
say.
That shouldn't have happened because if they would have done it, if they would have shot it in such a way that maybe when they got there, Abra's already out of the car or something, that's fine. But opening the door, it gets rid of that misdirection.
It does. The only thing I can think is maybe if he thought that they were watching. I don't know.
Maybe.
That's fair. That's a good point.
That's all I got for them.
I'll shut up.
I'll defend it to the...
No, that's a good point.
That's
a good point.
I didn't think about that.
That being said, I don't love this scene as a whole.
I don't either. As it unfolds, it's like, how am I supposed to...
It's almost like, what kind of movie am I watching? Because
Yeah.
it takes a hard turn at this scene. But I think we left off where she sedates the bunny.
Yes.
Dan and Billy are in the trees with guns. Mm-hmm. And Barry immediately gets shot and he dies.
They basically work through the entire... They untie the true knot.
They untie the true knot.
And I'm like, nice shining, Tex, because where the fuck did you learn to shoot like this?
My thing wasn't so much the shootout or whatever as it was, again, we don't see anything they do.
Powers.
No kind
all.
of shine whatsoever.
One can't go invisible or something.
Yeah,
one, like
you would
nothing,
think-
No, the
nothing
only one that
happens.
utilizes her power in this scene is Andy. And that's it.
And then again, if Dan is there, not one of you motherfuckers can pick up on his shine. Not one of you guys can tell.
They're
that
not like,
he's
ooh,
there.
let's eat that guy.
I just
It's
don't...
like, wait, something's here. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
if they can
Rose
sense her
could,
from-
or Crow is like, wait, something's wrong.
I feel like
Why
we have...
do you have these people here if they don't do anything?
We have
Except
a
eat all your
very...
steak.
Yeah, they just,
We have a very high stakes showdown with a good side and an evil side, both of which have these insane supernatural capabilities, and it's fought with fucking guns.
Yeah.
I feel like that could have been a way cooler scene, and it was handled very differently in the book, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, the fact that
It's
it
a little
was
bit of a bummer.
very
Yeah.
physical and material fight is a bummer.
Yeah.
And I will say that's my only sin for me for this movie is I just did not love this scene. That being said, after they kill Barry, they pick off every B member of the True Knot. And Andy gets shot. Dan approaches her to finish her, and he has no bullets. Dan tries to fight it, but she eventually uses her power to put him to sleep.
You should have been like, but I'm Dr. Sleep.
This is my job. She goes to kill Dan after he falls asleep, and Billy shoots her before she can. As she's dying, she tells Billy, kill yourself, and he does.
Now, this was a little cartoony for me because when he killed himself, she's kind of
She's
changing
cycling,
forms
yeah.
and cycling like Grandpa Flick
Flick.
did. But after he kills himself, she's like,
No,
Plus, didn't he shoot her in the neck?
yeah.
yeah.
So how is she still talking?
I don't know.
I don't like this scene. And I'm really mad that Billy got killed because, God damn it, all that man did,
yeah.
all he did was good.
Billy was a...
Moment of silence for
Raise
Billy.
your glass for Billy.
Please. So Rose, I guess, can see everything that's happening from where she is back at the camp, and she is screaming and crying the whole time. Abra suddenly realizes that the crow wasn't with them, and as she does, Crow sedates her actual body at her house. And as he carries her out, we see that he has killed her dad.
Yeah.
And kind of the way that we see his body with the knife in him reminded me of Dick Halloran's body
Right.
in The Shining.
Yes.
When we see he's dead. Like it was very, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in Crow's car,
I guess.
Van.
yes,
Yeah.
van, whatever the fuck, he has sedated her to make her go to sleep. And he says that like she'll drift in and out of consciousness, but her shine is put to sleep basically.
Right.
And he tells her that her dad's dead, that we lost people on both sides, and look, it was all for nothing because you ended up here anyway.
Can't we just call a truce at this point?
I mean, I guess not. So Dan goes to Abra's house and finds her dad, and he goes home and is crying for help, and he calls out for Abra and he calls out for Tony.
Now, at this point, because he's got a bottle in his hand, at this point I realize Halloran wasn't joking. He's really out of here because this is the perfect time for him to come back and help.
Doc, don't drink.
Nope.
Yeah, he's like, no, I'm fucking...
Yeah, he does almost drink, and then he smashes the bottle to the floor. And Dan finally tunes his mind like a radio and can barely hear Abra. And in this fucking great visual, the room tilts
Yes.
and Dan slides across the floor It's God
so
damn it.
good.
And I remember seeing that shot in the trailer, and I know why they put it in the trailer because it looks so fucking cool.
Yeah.
Suddenly he's in the van with Abra, and he sees what Crow has done to her. And they touch hands, and he's like, let me try something. They touch hands, and Abra sits up and asks where they're going. And then she goes, fuck, I feel hungover. And if you were Crow, wouldn't you be like, what the fuck did this child just say? Then we see that her eyes are blue, like Dan. Crow realized that she's not herself. And Dan's like, I'm the guy that killed your friends. And looks around and sees where they are.
Right.
And he points out Crow's hubris that since he thought he was going to live forever, of course he didn't wear his seatbelt. And so he moves the car, or makes Crow move the car, and he crashes the car against a tree, and Crow is ejected from the car.
Right.
And Dan is ejected from the situation, and he's back at his apartment.
Right.
Rose screams. Again, she's seeing or sensing everything that's happening.
Yeah.
So that's her whole crew.
That's everybody. She's the last one.
Abra goes over and looks at Crow, and I was like, well, at least try this theme. Just see what all the fuss is about.
Report back.
Exactly. Like, what? Why is it so good? Why do they want it so bad? I don't know.
Instead, she watches Crow die. Rose projects herself into the road basically to call Abra a bitch.
Yeah, there was nothing really was accomplished here.
But we get this really cool shot where Abra hesitates for a moment and then just fucking walks through her. And Rose goes back to their little cooler for steam and fucking drinks everything.
Dude, she gets high on her own supply.
She gets high on her own supply.
Yeah.
And we watch her hand start healing. So it's like, oh, shit's getting
yeah.
real.
Oh, it's the goods. This must be the big steam you were talking about.
So the next morning, Dan finds Abra at a motel, and she gets in the car and he tells her that they're going to Colorado to the Overlook because the place is dangerous for them, but it might be even more dangerous for Rose.
Right.
And apparently this is where the showdown is going to take place. So that night, Abra's mom calls her, and she has returned home and seen her husband murdered on the floor. And she's like, oh my God, where are you? And Abra's like, love you, and hangs up the phone.
I would hope that my mutant kid or my shine kid would say a little more than that.
Well, she throws the phone out the window as well. And I was like, dude, Rose can track you. Oh, yeah, law enforcement also exists.
Yes.
You are a missing child.
But she tells Dan that when they're safe, he needs to call her mom and tell her where they are. They stop to get gas. And before we leave, we get the music from The Shining.
Yes, it's the Dies Irae back again from the dead. And this is one of two shots that were actually from The Shining.
Yes.
The sweeping motion from the water over to the mountain road. It's from The Shining, but it's
just sharpened and darkened.
Yeah,
Yes.
It looks really good.
It's fucking insane.
I can't believe it's the same footage. It's unbelievable. And oh my God, I got goosebumps.
Yes.
I did, because I love The Shining so much, and I'm like, we're headed back.
So they arrive at the Overlook Hotel. Dan tells Abra to stay in the car until Rose has arrived because he doesn't want her in the hotel any longer than she has to be. But he needs to go inside and wake it up. This is the best part of the whole movie.
Absolutely.
The movie is great so far, but it has all been leading up to this.
Yes.
This is everything. Dan walks inside the Overlook, and lights start to turn on for him as he's walking in. He goes downstairs to the boiler room and turns everything up and on.
Right.
The hotel looks bad and aged
does.
and old. He goes to their old room, their apartment or whatever that they had stayed in, and sees the hole in the door.
Yeah.
He goes over to the bathroom, and we get the exact shot of him as the Here's Johnny scene.
Yes.
From The Shining. We get a flashback to Wendy screaming in the bathroom. And I feel like in this scene, she really looked like Shelley Duvall.
Oh, no, it was
yeah.
great.
He looks and sees the window that Wendy helped him out of when he ran away. Like, it's a lot.
No, it's
a
incredible.
lot happened here. Now we're at my favorite scene of the whole fucking movie.
Before we get into this scene.
Okay.
Every single shot so far of him walking through, the angles and the shots are what we remember of Kubrick's The Shining. It's like Flanagan chose particular angles on purpose to remind you.
Definitely.
And the framing of Dan in all these shots is the framing of where Jack Nicholson was in the frame in The Shining. It's just unbelievable. It's like a trip down memory lane.
Yes. A horrible, horrible memory lane.
Oh, yeah. No, the one you don't want to remember.
Yeah.
But take us to the best scene.
Dan goes to the gold room. And it's funny because I was really wondering how you were going to take this scene.
Really?
To me, it is my favorite part of the entire movie. But you're weird.
I am.
So I was really wondering. I knew it would swing dramatically to one side or the other. As he walks in, all the candles on all the tables light up. There's a glass on the bar. He sits down and looks forward just like Jack.
Yes.
Like exactly like Jack in The Shining. And we hear somebody say, "Slow night, Mr. Torrance." The bartender pours him a drink and Dan goes, "This was your brand," that he remembers from when he was a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
So the bartender says his name is Lloyd.
Just like the bartender in The Shining.
Just like the bartender
Yeah,
in
he
The
said
Shining.
The same thing.
But we finally get to see him. And it's fucking Jack Torrance as played by Henry fucking Thomas.
Fucking incredible. Incredible. He suggests Nicholson in such a weird way that I never saw before, or I would have never guessed or even cast him. And I read that they had thought about casting people that looked like Jack Nicholson.
I'm so glad that they didn't.
They had thought of Christian Slater, Leonardo DiCaprio.
What?
And they even thought of using Jack Nicholson himself, but de-aging him.
Right.
But this choice is so smart and it's so well done.
I was amazed. I think the first time I watched this whole scene with my mouth open.
It's so
I
powerful.
I couldn't believe that I was seeing what I was seeing.
It's powerful.
God, it's just so good. So Dan starts telling him pretty much what happened after everything, that they had moved to Florida because they never wanted to see the snow again. He says that Wendy died when he was 20, and back then before someone dies, he would see flies all over their face, and he called them death flies. And the last time he saw his mom, she was covered in them. And Lloyd is like,
All right.
oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he tries to get him to take a drink. And I wrote this down. Dan says, a man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes the man. I was like, God.
God damn.
But then Lloyd / Jack calls it medicine. And he goes on this whole speech about a man is surrounded by mouths and he has to provide for the mouths, and it's enough to make you sick. It's enough to make a man sick, and this is the medicine for it.
Amen. It's rough. Like it.
And so Lloyd drinks. And then after he gives his speech, he pours the glass again. And Dan is crying at this point. And he won't drink when Lloyd Jack is trying to get him to drink. So Lloyd slaps the glass off the bar. And Abra calls Dan. And when Dan turns around, we see that the glass is back on the bar. And nobody else is there.
I do want to say, though, and I know you didn't mention it, but he tells the mind is a chalkboard.
Yes. And this is the eraser.
This is the eraser, which is very true. But, I mean, but remember he got that apartment and it had the chalkboard on the wall.
Yes.
Oh,
he never used it.
Shit.
But when he stopped, because he was drinking, but when he stopped drinking,
the chalkboard filled
the
up.
chalkboard filled up.
That is really good.
fucking
So,
a great observation.
I thought it was very interesting because this scene, it marries Dr. Sleep and The Shining,
Absolutely.
of course, but at the same time, it shows you the distinction between Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and Stephen King's The Shining. Kubrick's The Shining was about isolation and your past and your inability to escape it and the history that carries on.
Right.
Stephen King's The Shining was a more human story
Yes.
about alcoholism, the difficulty of maintaining the family
And
unit,
anger.
frustration, and that kind of a thing. So this brings everything
Like
together.
full circle. Yeah.
And it's done so masterfully.
It's my favorite scene in the film.
It's,
And a great film.
yes.
No, yeah.
100%.
So Dan goes, I guess, to the front doors of the hotel, and Abra comes inside and says this place is sick. It's like cancer, but worse. But she says it's sick like my Momo was sick. So I feel like
She knows.
She already knew. But anyway, Dan eyes an axe behind some emergency glass, which is, again, very full circle. Outside, Rose arrives and she sees their car. She walks in and surveys the overlook. She sees the elevator with blood pouring out of it, which again,
incredible.
And she kind of looked pleased.
She's like, "Oh hell yeah,
I'm home."
that's what I like to
Did
see.
she know that the hotel was bad, or was she getting off because the hotel was bad?
Or a little bit of both. I don't know.
She wasn't
I don't
afraid.
know.
I know that.
Yeah, well,
No,
I
she
would
wasn't
be.
afraid.
because Abra was like, "There's some shit going on here," and she walked in and she's just like, "Hey,"
Because they're on two sides of the coin.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So here we are at the showdown. Dan and Abra are waiting for Rose on the stairs. Rose walks in. We see the typewriter, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And Dan tells Abra in her mind, when this starts, run.
Right.
Clearly,
No,
it's going to
yeah,
be
yeah.
bad.
Mm-hmm.
So Rose is like, oh, yeah, run, and I'll find you
Yeah.
and make you scream for years. Like, she's like, bitch, that's not...
You killed my whole family.
Yeah. And she does. She realizes that he's the one that killed Crow.
Yeah.
Dan is like, go. And then both of their eyes turn white.
Yeah. Start warging.
And, yes. And Rose is transported into the frozen hedge maze. And we get this amazing aerial shot of this maze going on forever.
Oh, it's incredible.
She thinks she's in Abra's mind.
Right.
And she's chasing her around corners, which again, very much like The Shining.
Yeah.
Yes.
Abra tells her, you're going to die here. And she slices her leg.
There's no magic in that. That's just
Not at all.
That's just street smarts.
Rose is like, look, we're the same. The only difference between us is time. I was just like you, but somebody gave me a sense of community. And I wonder if that was Grandpa Flick.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
The way they had made it seem was like Rose had always led the True
Yeah.
Knot, but in that moment you're like, shit, Grandpa Flick
She took
started
over
this
for
whole
him.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it was so sad when he died.
Right.
But in all of this, Abra slices Rose's legs 2 more times.
Too fast.
Yeah. She tries to do it again, and Rose catches her by the neck. One of Dan's boxes is slowly coming up behind her, and she, at the last minute, realizes this isn't even your
Yeah.
mind, and she breaks out.
Yeah.
Back at the Overlook, Dan tells Abra to run. Rose is like, how did we even miss you? And I mean, he was dulled.
Yeah, but at the same time, at the same
When he was
point
a
in
kid
time
in
when they were
1980.
eating Violet,
Yeah.
he was fucking up.
When they were eating Violet.
He was getting
No.
the fuck out of the
Yeah.
Overlook.
And that was when he was like, I'm not using my shine anymore. I'm not. So it was.
So she's like,
he hit
damn,
it.
for 40 years you've been
Yeah.
just shining on and we're hungry.
Yeah. Where have you been?
Yeah.
She tells him that his steam is polluted, and she starts advancing at him up the stairs, just like Jack came after Wendy.
Yes, and he is windy with
Yeah,
the axe. He's
windy,
holding it like
just
she
like
was.
she held the bat.
Yeah, and Rose is even putting up her hands like Jack was when he was asking for the bat. It's incredible.
Rose kind of tries to offer him the same deal that she gave Andy, and he's not having it.
Nope.
He's like, says that she's the last of her kind, and she's like, no, I'm not. You know, I'm just the prettiest, is what she says.
No lies detected.
Right? Dan axes Rose a question in her shoulder. He
Yes.
gets right in there.
Yeah.
And she hits him with the butt of the axe, uses it to cut his femoral artery, and throws him down the stairs.
So now he's Jack in the equation, tumbling down the stairs.
Yes.
So he played both of his parents in the span of like a minute.
I'm just confused here because, again, he's not using his shine. So did she become stronger because she took
She
all their
ate
dope?
all that. Yeah.
Or-
Probably, yeah.
But
yeah.
if he's the strongest dudes ever seen, you can't fight this woman.
Well, she's
But
like,
when
she's
you-
on steroids.
Yeah, she's like
like
1,000 years
hyped
old
up.
and she's
Okay,
eating
but
all the steam in
again,
the world.
he's the strongest he's ever seen.
Well, he's the strongest
So-
with the shine mentally.
Okay,
She
Not
so
could
why
be
didn't
physically.
he use it?
Because
Well-
You don't have to touch him. I'm just
Well-
saying. No, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That I was kind of like, well, what?
more physical.
Yeah, I
As
was like,
opposed to,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, we've seen.
That's kind of,
Yeah. But I guess they physically can die. So he was like, I'll kill her. Like, I will kill her.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, he tried the shine, didn't work.
He did. Oh, that's true. He sent
so
her to
he's
the
like, well, fuck,
the
I guess I gotta
headspace.
chop her up.
Yeah. So she goes down there and starts sticking her finger in the wound that she made from his with the axe. And he is screaming and steam is coming out and she is loving it.
Lapping it up.
Yes. While she's drinking the steam, we are getting all these flashbacks of Danny running down the hall and Jack, again played by Henry Thomas, limping and chasing him with an axe. We see Jack coming at Wendy on the stairs. We see the drowned, rotting old woman. We see the twins. Like, it's like the greatest hits.
She's learning everything.
Yeah. She realizes that he's not alone in his mind. And this is just a great line.
Oh, yeah.
She says, "What are you hiding in there? Something special?" And he says, "They're not special. They're starving." Boxes fucking fly open. And the bathtub woman grabs Rose. Everyone from the Overlook is there.
Yeah.
Derwent, the twins. Suspiciously, Roger the bear dog man is not.
I want to know what he's up to these days.
Yeah, what you got going on?
Yeah.
They jump her and start sliding their fingers under the skin of her face.
It looks so good.
Yes. They drink her steam until she disappears and only her hat is left, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But then they turn on Dan.
Well, they turned
Right.
to Dan, and Dan should have been like, "Great job, guys. All right, so if you could just
If
go ahead and get
everyone-
back in your boxes."
If everyone could return to their
Yeah,
I
boxes.
think
that'd
that
be
through
great.
very
No,
good.
he
No.
didn't. Upstairs, Abra sees the twins. And then she sees Dan walk in, limping with an axe, just like Jack.
Yeah.
But one eye is white.
Mm-hmm.
She runs upstairs and we see the iconic carpet. She sees Derwent and he's still like, "Great party, isn't it?"
He's still having a good time. He's like, "I'm making the best of
loves
this."
it.
All right.
She goes into room 237 and Dan is screaming for her.
Of all the rooms.
For real. And the old woman is in the bathtub.
Uh-huh.
She's back home.
Hey.
But like when she's looks like she's gonna advance on her, Abra's like, "Bitch, like fucking
Yeah,
bring it."
she does.
Like, no. Dan comes in and we have this moment that is basically the ending of the Shining book, but with Abra and Dan instead of Danny and Jack.
Right.
Very interesting.
Yeah. She tells him that he's wearing a false face, that it's not Dan.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, "You don't realize that Dan stopped at the boiler room. That's the first thing he did when he got here." So Dan almost chops her,
Yeah.
Yeah, he does.
but he gains control of himself long enough to tell her to run. Abra runs and he immediately is taken back over by the hotel.
Yeah, that one milky eye is back.
That one milky
he
eye
did,
is back.
Yeah, it did come
Bad
back.
news.
I guess the hotel listened though, because he's like, "Oh shit, we gotta
Yeah,
go
we gotta
fix
go
this
stop
down in the
this."
boiler room." Abra runs outside and he goes straight to the boiler room, and the boiler room catches on fire because he's able to stop his hotel self from turning everything off.
Uh-huh.
Dan is back himself and the flames start spreading around him. Now the camera pans over and we see Wendy. Mm-hmm. And then the camera pans back to Dan and he's Danny. He's a little boy again and Wendy is holding his face.
Incredible shot.
Yeah.
I read that it was actually shot in one take.
Wow.
Ewan McGregor just got the fuck out of there as quick as he could, and then they replaced him with the child actor. It
That's
looks
cool.
so
No,
good.
yeah, it
It's
looks
a
good.
beautiful moment
It
too.
really is.
And then outside the Overlook, Abra is just watching as the Overlook is overcome with flames
Right.
and
Yeah.
just dying. Back at her house, she's talking to Dan in her room, and she's like, "I knew you were going to be okay." And she asks if he thinks that Rose was telling the truth about there being more of them out there. And he's like, "Well, maybe, but also there's more of people like you. Like there is evil, but there's still good."
Yeah.
Which is a really good message. And he says there are people like her, people who stand. Again, a reference to the
Yeah.
stand.
There you go.
And he tells her that he was wrong about telling her to hide her shine away. And he tells her to shine on.
John Lennon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Abra's mom comes in and Dan is gone. And we realize he died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her mom's like, "Who are you talking to?" And she starts to lie. And then she tells the truth. "I was talking to Dan." And we go on and he's fine and Dad's fine too. And her mom takes it well. She's like,
Yeah.
"All right." Her mom goes back downstairs and Abra goes to the bathroom where that fucking old bitch is still
It's-
hanging out in the
yeah.
tub. We see her close the door and then the movie ends with music from
From The Shining. Yeah, it's the same song that ends The Shining. The same song for the Gold Room.
Yeah.
And that's Dr. Sleep. What did you guys think?
I thought it was great. I like I said at the top, Mike Flanagan had a very difficult task ahead of him.
Definitely.
And I think he excelled in a lot of ways. There were a few things that I probably would have changed. The difficulty of making a sequel to a film from 40 years ago is that, no pun intended, you open a lot of boxes that may not have needed to be opened. Like, just very quickly, for example, all the spirits from the Overlook Hotel eating Rose's steam, right? So that's what they were after the whole time, you know? Why did, in The Shining, in room 237, why did the old lady just rough Danny up? Why didn't she kill him and eat his steam?
Because pain and fear purify it. So maybe she was trying to hurt him. Maybe she did drink a little bit.
But she's like, I'm going to come
and
back
later.
later.
And that's why he was all regressed.
You know what I mean? Like, it's little things like that. That I'm like, I understand why it fits into this movie and why it makes sense. But if all they were after was steam, why didn't they just... And then Dick Halloran, he's got The Shining.
That's
why
true.
didn't they fuck him up?
And that's,
why didn't they do anything to him?
And that's also, I mean, that's the book, too.
You know? So it's like, I mean, just little things like that. But you're like, you know... If you're willing to overlook things like that and forgive them, yeah, exactly. I can't stop. You're gonna see just amazing craft at work here. Mike Flanagan, everyone. You know, just
he's incredible.
But what did you think, JP?
I really enjoyed the movie, and I did love it. But like you said, there's a few things that I was confused about, or I was just like, I had questions, and I mean, of course, that affected my score for the movie.
Right.
But it was just like, okay, when they take her on the stairs, like you're saying, they were only after the steam or whatever. Again, if she took all her steam dope and she's this strong, couldn't you have pushed these entities away from you? Couldn't you have been like,
some of them,
I'm Rose the Hat,
She
bitch.
put up no fight.
She put up no fight. You're right.
She didn't. She's
like,
just
I guess
like,
I'm just going to get eaten now.
You know what I mean? For real?
And she was terrified.
You're this bad
So her steam was
motherfucker
delicious.
who's lived who knows how long. These ghosts come and you turn all Scooby-Doo and you're like, oh, what happened? It's like, no, you know what I mean?
You're going to read my read,
right? Couldn't you have just been like, not today, and pushed them off of you?
You would think.
But you didn't. You just let them eat you. And then the hat staying there and falling, of course, earlier in the scene when she was in the grocery store, when Abra pushed her away, she's like, don't touch my hat.
Yeah.
The hat fell. What does that have to do with anything then? The hat's...
I think...
Was that her power? Was that her...
I think the hat was just like her being territorial in the grocery store. And then the hat on the ground is like this perfect bookend for her death as a character.
But I don't know. Like I said...
You're right, because all of her other clothes disappeared. I mean, you're right. All right.
Oh, that's what you're saying. Yeah,
it's a really great fucking visual.
No,
okay?
It is, but like I said, there was just... Not that I had a lot of questions, but I feel like the lack of using shine from the other extras and her group, the lack of shine and the fighting when they're shooting each other.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
The questions, and I get it because I thought the same thing too. The little baseball boy, I was like, well, why didn't he use his shine? But you're right. He didn't. He probably didn't know it.
Yeah.
But
the people in the True Knot know
right,
their powers.
They know it, but... but again, that too, if he knows what the pitcher's thinking, how could his intuition or whatever, his shine not be like, run? You know he's fixing to pitch whatever and you hit it, but your shine isn't telling you when you're in danger, your spidey sense doesn't go off. You know what I mean? There's just little things.
I agree with you.
I get it.
And I can't overlook them. And like I said, I did really enjoy the movie and I love it
absolutely.
as a sequel and as like a finisher or whatever to close it. But it did those small things. It did affect my score. I will say that.
I just wanted to make a couple points about the book.
Okay.
Because fucking of course I do.
Right.
In the book, Dan visits Abra's grandmother and learns that Jack Torrance had an affair with her. And so Abra's mother is his half sister.
So he's
literally Uncle Dan. Yeah.
Cut that. I don't like that at all.
I don't either.
I'm glad that they cut that.
When he visits her grandmother, he inhales her cancerous steam. And that's how he defeats the True Knot. They all drink it and get sick.
This ain't the Green Mile. What the fuck?
But you know what? But you know what? I would have rather seen that than a fucking gunfight. Honestly,
if we're talking about efficiency, the movie handled it better.
Yeah.
I just don't like.
Because how do you separate her cancerous steam from your regular steam? Is there a different valve?
I'm not a scientist.
Like, look, if you drink from his
I'm
nose,
not
it's
a
going to be...
steam
Yeah,
expert,
exactly.
but,
That's actually a really good point.
You know, so I actually, I take it back. Maybe the gun battle was probably smarter.
I definitely like that they weren't actually brother and sister in the
That's
movie.
really-
That's
yeah,
a lot. Like
that's a little
whole
too
lot.
convenient.
Yeah. And also because the Overlook burned down in the book, the final battle takes place on a campsite owned by the True Knot that is on the grounds of where the Overlook stood.
So do you see
And-
the Overlook at all?
It's gone.
No, I mean, like, is it in their minds or anything?
No,
It's in their hearts?
You're on
Yeah.
a campsite that's on the ground where the Overlook
But see,
stood.
even that though seems
And-
kind of cheesy. You
and-
just picked this
well,
site
hang
out
on,
of
hang on.
coincidence.
Yeah,
hang on.
Oh, God.
Because if you want to talk about cheese, you're really not gonna like this next part.
Oh, no.
When they like the movie, the True Knot is wiped out before Rose,
Right.
and Rose is killed by Billy, who lives, and the ghost of Jack Torrance pushing her off of a platform, and she falls and breaks her neck and dies.
Nay, I got to be honest with you. I hate this a lot.
And Jack waves goodbye to Danny.
Nay, I hate it.
Oh wow.
And I like the book. I'm talking shit, but
Nay. No. No.
I like the book. Also,
Yeah.
and the hotel doesn't explode because it already exploded.
Yeah.
Dan is still alive, and at the end of the book, he is celebrating. They're all together celebrating Abra's 15th birthday and his 15th year of sobriety.
Now, I will say, I think that they did make a mistake in killing Dan. I feel like it sucks a lot
so
that he had to
sad.
sacrifice himself like that. So if that could have been played into the ending of this film, that would have been good. But
Yeah.
they can lose
No,
everything
yeah.
else.
Yeah.
Literally everything
That
else.
that would have been fine
Yeah.
if he would have somehow got out,
Yeah.
and then they would have showed that and whatever. But yeah, all that other stuff.
I feel like he
yeah, we
really
don't
just
need that.
made it come full circle with the ending of the movie really paralleling
yeah.
the ending of the Shining book. And
Him. Yeah.
Jack sacrificed himself basically to save Dan,
Right.
and Dan sacrificed himself to save Abra.
And it also goes hand in hand with the film because if he's taking on the Dick Halloran role,
he
Yeah.
died as well.
lost his life to
So,
yeah.
but none of that. None of that.
We don't need all that other crap.
All that being said, my impressions on the movie, I fucking loved it. Obviously,
Right.
Mike Flanagan for the fucking win. The movie was great. Seeing Henry Thomas as fucking Jack Torrance changed my life. Like it was incredible, and it really intertwined itself with Kubrick's film just at an expert level that I can't. It's insane. So now we got to get into ratings. For all the reasons that I said. And I also want to express a moment of remorse for not giving The Shining 10 out of 10.
No, I'm going to be honest with you. I would like to retroactively change my score from a 9.5 out of 10 on The Shining to a 10 out of 10. If you will allow me to do such a thing, and
if-
I will allow you to do such a thing.
And if you're allowed to do it, I'm allowed to do it. I would definitely give The Shining 10 out of 10.
Agreed.
Just because the things that I felt watching recreations of scenes of this movie, my only flaw against The Shining was them not fully explaining or exploring some aspects of it. I can fucking overlook that for just how fucking great that movie is. So if I'm changing The Shining to 10 out of 10, now we're going to get to Dr. Sleep.
Right.
And on a scale from 1 to 10 invisible boxes, I give Dr. Sleep 9 out of 10 invisible boxes.
I love The Shining. I love this movie, and I get what you're saying, and I can overlook a lot of stuff. But for the reasons that I stated earlier,
Right.
I'm going to give it an 8 invisible boxes out of 10. I love the movie. Don't get me wrong. But again, show me these people shine. At least give me a glimpse.
You're not wrong.
I can't disagree with you.
At least give me the bald guy who died first in the gun battle, him levitate, and why he's trying to get away. They shoot him, and then it's like, oh shit. So
He
that was
could
his
do
power.
that,
Yeah, that was
yeah.
his
Yeah.
power. Then I don't need to even. What was Crow Daddy's whole point?
He's a
Besides,
scouter.
when did we see that though?
He found the baseball boy.
And he found
but
Abra.
when?
Well, it
They
was all off
just
camera.
know that. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. Or at least like because we seen the the hat. We
Rose
seen
do her
Rose
thing, yeah.
doing her thing. We seen Snakebite Lucy or whatever the hell her name
Andy.
is. Andy. We see her do her thing. What about the rest of the people?
That's a fair point.
You know what I mean? We see Dan do his stuff. We see Abra do her stuff. The rest of the extras, they did nothing.
No.
But died.
Yeah.
Like they did nothing.
They were expendable bodies.
Show me at least even just like a glimpse of what they do. Or even if she was like, over there, that's George and he can whatever.
You're not
Grandpa,
wrong.
he's, he used to be, God amongst everyone. And now with his older age, we got to keep him whatever. Anything. Give me a little background to these people.
No, I agree.
You know what I mean? And it was just that. It's like, you want me to believe what's going on here, then show me
Give me
what
a little
everybody
more.
does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not just you pick and choose who does what. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
When some people do
And
nothing.
then again, with Dan, you can't tell me, oh, I've never seen a shine like yours before, but he does the smallest amount of shit.
But he almost tricked her.
Yeah, but who tricked who?
He
Rose?
almost got Rose. He almost did it.
Oh, yeah, but even she figured that out pretty quick.
Barely.
Yeah, she was almost
But-
in the box.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Which, by the
Even
way,
that.
can you
Can
put real
she?
people in a box?
yeah, no, yeah.
Where did that
See,
come from? Yeah. That was
So how,
never.
so how would we even know if that would work?
That was never. That
it was
like,
worth a
gotta
try.
it.
Damn it.
I know, but I'm just saying I would have liked a little more. But overall, I love the
Yeah,
movie.
it's an incredible
I
movie.
could watch this movie over and over again,
Mhm.
and watch The Shining before it, and then watch
Oh,
this,
yeah.
or
For
watch
sure.
this by itself.
T.
So, taking everything into account that both of you said, I think that this movie needs to be commended, and Mike Flanagan, of course,
Yes.
for being able to bridge these two worlds that they started at the same seed, but they were at odds with each other. And he was able to do it in a way that's not only palatable, but it exceeds all your expectations of what you were even expecting. Not just on a technical standpoint, but on a storytelling one.
Yeah.
With everything taken into account, I think I'm going to have to split the difference. I hate to do it, but I got to do it. Someone's got to. I love this movie, and I will watch it as a double feature.
For sure.
No.
Like,
yeah.
hands down, no
Definitely.
problem. But I have to give Dr. Sleep 8.5 out of 10 invisible boxes.
But those scores are all still great.
No,
No,
yeah.
yeah, and like you said, taking it into account of, and obviously I've never read the books, just like you said you haven't.
Yeah.
But if he is doing, like you said, fixing the books and the first movie to kind of like make sense with each other, it was great.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, it was fantastic. But I want a little more. Just a little more. Just give me a little more.
Well, that's all from us at Podmortem. What would you rate Dr. Sleep, and what should we watch next? Let us know on Twitter at @ThePodmortem. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook. Be sure to follow each of us on Twitter at Blood and Smoke, at RealStreeter84, and at TravisMWH. And remember, always shine on. Until next time.